Wachi Shinnecock, Wachi Pamanaki. I lead canoe. I'm Butterfly Woman. I am actually from the Shinnecock Indian Nation, which is located in Southampton, Long Island, New York. And it is an honor to be here with each and every one of you. We have a long night. We have hopes to be able to hear from over close to 29 different international leaders from around the world. So I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Because right now, we are in times that, you know, our people need our people need our leadership. We need to hear from you directly, because sometimes there's a lot of unheard messages. So with the Indigenous Peoples Movement, is a coalition of people from around the world. We have actually in 2018, actually, or 2019, at the top of 2019, we held a huge march in Washington, D.C. And people from all around, came, and a lot of you guys were there. And so that's what this is. It's a movement. And right now we need solutions to what's happening. There's a lot of things that you guys are individually working on. So hopefully we'll be able to get to each and every one of you to talk about that and hear about that. But we want to start this in a good way. And we just want to ask our brother Keith if you could actually start us out in a prayer and a song.
Just want to say good evening to everybody. You can hear me. You can hear me pretty good?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening to everybody. Just want to say Noah, Hikshay, Stongo, Salkukire Tiku Skitui. It's a beautiful day. And I pray that blessings upon everybody here represented, blessings to your homes, your minds, your spirits. I'm just honored to be here with y'all to offer this prayer and these songs here to open it up. And I always believe and was taught it's really important to open up with prayer. So I want to do that right now. Noah, it is to the Ofunga Hizagi de Mizi, Leta got Staka Kiripa set got Skiwa Kupa, Scotty spit to the Saru, Kusutu, Rawira Kuru, Kuruk did all we do, stood all with the Kitui. At this to the Ofunga Hizagi de Mizi, say Data chicks to anyway to the he, so Kukiri Tiki Skutui, it is to the thank you for this time, this day, as you be with us here through this technology, through this medium that we're using here today, that our words will be protected, our words will be blessed. And that you'll move through each person here that with that spirit of healing, understanding, and that spirit of love and compassion, not only for ourselves in healing, but for this world, in this world that needs the healing. So in that, it is to the wall, Ofunga, say, Tata Chixo, Hidimahe, Maru. Omekanitat, Omochis. Omekanita pomochi, o fanikatanis, omis, mikoshavagi awepat. Mikosabat Yahweh Pak Mojanita Hitzkat Yitan Hayomo Fanawe Paks Hayomo Fanawe Pak O Fanika Tanis Omis Omekanita Omochis Omekanita Omochis O Fanika Tanis Omis. That song means we all have an appointed day to die. We all have an appointed day to make our journey. So as you live this life and you strive to do the best you can here on this earth through the the journeys that you made, the words that you expressed, and the hurt and the pain that you feel around us because of the injustice. We have a choice to operate out of our gifts, and through those gifts, they say we can bring a spiritual balance and healing to this world. And that was a seminal, and I'll share this one part of this Pawnee song for y'all.
Genetically, and we can do that with the Indigenous Peoples Movement to heal our people around the world. So, so I have a couple of questions for individuals. I know that we have Dr. Berta here, but I do want to start out just briefly. If you guys can just introduce yourself and just introduce yourself and tell us, you know, where you're from and what your role is to our people.
You want me to introduce myself, for example?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Dr. Bertha Ai. I'm an infectious disease specialist. I live in South Dakota, and I treat COVID-19 patients. And since the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of education on just teaching, empowering people to know what the virus is so they can protect themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could start with you, Daria.
Hello, Anyuti Marsan, Igu Dayara do Rigo e Padiro Marsan. My name is Dayara. I am from the Tucano Indigenous Nation in the Brazilian Amazon. I am coordinator of an indigenous radio that is called Radio Yande, and I am in the support of communication with the indigenous movements here in Brazil. Thank you.
So you're actually calling in from Brazil?
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we're all around the world. Madonna, can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're from? You might have to press, I think you might be muted.
How do I do that?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Tell me how.
We can hear you.
Can you?
Yes.
Hey, this is all old school. You know, I'm an elder, so this Zoom thing is not, I mean, unless there's a button that says sound or mute, I don't know. So you can hear me though, huh?
Yes, we can.
You hear me?
We appreciate you being on here with us.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not going to be very good at this. I can see that right now, but I'm glad that I'm included. This is awesome. I live in South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation, and right now we're in a battle with the state of South Dakota as usual over this COVID. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. And Carmen?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carmen Perez Jordan. I am the CEO and president of the Gathering for Justice that works with young people who are currently informally incarcerated, as well as we try to also fight against stopping police brutality. It's so good to see some friends here and make new friends as well on this call. And I am the wife of somebody who did 9 years in prison, 2 years in solitary confinement, as well as I am Chicana, Mexican American, and the mother of a Indigenous Chicano Mexican 20-month-old, and soon to be the mother of, I'm 5 months pregnant, but really happy to be here and to share the work that we're doing. And it's good to see everyone on here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yorta?
Gata Neil Yotsi Yotsi Yir Nangan Mulana Yembana Waka Nangan Mulana Yembana Yakapna. My name is Neil. I come from the Yorta Yorta people, which is from so-called Australia. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I am an artist. I'm a custodian who continues culture for my people through my music as an artist, but also as a grassroots activist and just organizer for my people, and somebody who's all about sovereignty for First Nations people, not only here on these lands of so-called Australia, but across all the parts of the globe. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you beautiful people here today.
Thank you. And Sarah Eaglehart?
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Eaglehart. I'm Oglala Lakota, and I am in Rapid City, South Dakota in the Black Hills right now. I'm Oglala Lakota. I am CEO of Return of the Heart Foundation, which is an Indigenous women-led foundation funding Indigenous women-led initiatives in the United States. So I'm excited to be here. We have been really focused on fundraising for PPE, and have raised in-kind donations as well as funds and resources close to $1 million. So we're really excited about that and ready to get that personal protective equipment out the door to our communities. So glad to be here and be with all you beautiful people.
Thank you. And Lewis Reed?
Hey, just when they said that there were travel restrictions, here it is that I have the opportunity to have a passport into so many different beautiful places and hearing so many different accents. This is awesome. It reminds me of when I was serving in almost 14 years in federal prison, how I was just around a rainbow coalition of people literally from all across the world. My name is Louis L. Reed. I'm the national organizer for #Cut50, a bipartisan criminal justice organization co-founded by CNN political commentator and now Reform Alliance CEO. And I fight for our people. I fight for the de-incarceration of people who have been disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. And I'm just happy to be here and to be able to add value to this conversation.
Thank you. Natani Means? I don't think we can hear you. Okay, well, we'll come back to you. Lance Gums?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lance A. Gums. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Shinnecock Indian Nation on Eastern Long Island here in New York. We are the closest federal tribe to New York City. I'm also the Regional Vice President for the National Congress of American Indian, and that's for the Northeast region here. Obviously, we've been working on this COVID issue here in our community. We are in one of the epicenters of the pandemic here in New York on the east end of Long Island. And our community is surrounded by the lifestyles of the rich and famous. We probably live in one of the richest communities in America. And it's been a task trying to keep our people safe on the local level, and then on the national level. We've been fighting for the CARES Act, the release of the CARES Act funds, which actually just got released 2 days ago. But we've been in a major battle with the federal government over that, and making sure that those funds go to the 574 federally recognized tribes versus the ANCs in Alaska, the Alaska Native Corporations, which are for-profit corporations. So we've been working extremely hard on that. We did not get all of the $8 billion that was allocated for Indian country, but we can talk about that as we move forward. But that is what I've been working on and doing here, both locally and nationally.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Roberto?
Taigwe ituno kena atia ono diri mukaro agwebana boriken taino cacique daka. I just want to say greetings, everyone. My name is Roberto Mucaro Borrero. I'm a member of the Guainia Taino tribe. I'm president of the United Confederation of Taino People. I have a pretty good history in the international indigenous peoples movement throughout the years in various action themes such as climate change, sustainable development. Right now, like most of us, we're concerned with COVID-19, and I'm trying to assist through the Confederation, helping our people back on their island homelands with PPE, and also continue to raise the visibility of what are our rights, human rights, indigenous people's rights during this time of COVID-19. Thank you. Hahom.
Thank you. And Nikki?
Right now. Piali, Coletansi, Kniatoka, Nicola Halika Sanchez Huds, Nimai Papiol, and Cuscatlan. My name is Nikki Sanchez. I come from the Chalatenango region of El Salvador, also known as Cuscatlan. And I'm also a settler of Irish and Scottish descendants who's now in Canada. And I'm here on the Lekwungen and Coast Salish territories. I am an Indigenous media maker, community organizer, author, and journalist. And currently, right now, we're working with a coalition of Indigenous youth from 34 different nations here on West Coast homelands to oversee the forced development of a pipeline through sovereign Indigenous territories, as well as the forcing through of man camps despite and against the COVID health recommendations. So that is currently what we're doing on the ground to support the communities here from being exposed to yet another pandemic. Thank
you. Reverend Yearwood?
Yes, power to the people, everybody. What's going on? Man, it's so good to see so many of my friends. Man, this has made my day, just even this. And happy birthday to the freedom fighter who was killed in Georgia, Brother Aubrey. We stand with his family. All power to the people. We're so glad the folks were arrested. We're not settling on that though until we see a conviction. Too many times over and over, we've seen the arrest, we've made the applause, we made the cheers, and then later on they've gotten out. That will not cut it. We stand with them right now to ensure that they are convicted. And we stand with my dear Native sisters. This week, we stood with them side by side as we know that they have been murdered and brutalized. The man camps got to go. The pipelines got to go. We stand with our sisters who are in Canada, in America, with them. I am Rev Yearwood, president of the Hip Hop Caucus. I am so honored to be here this week. Make sure my brother T.C. Muhammad will make sure I say this. This week we have our Rona Roundtable that's going on. We want to invite everybody to be a part of that. If you go to ronaroundtable.eventbrite.com, that's ronaroundtable.eventbrite.com. This May 13th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are doing a collective with all of our members in the Hip Hop Caucus in 25 cities around the country. We'll be organizing, mobilizing, and energizing. So to all of you, know this. I love you. Stand strong no matter what you're going through. Be encouraged. We people of a darker hue are mighty, and we are proud, and we are resilient. All power to the people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so I got you, Sean King.
Hey, everybody. It's so good to see each and every one of you. I'm excited to see all of your faces. So many of you are either my personal friends or people whose work and life I've seen from afar and admire. I want to thank all of you for your support over the past few weeks for the family of Ahmaud Arbery, and we're continuing, just as Reverend Yearwood said, continuing to fight for one more man to be arrested in that case, and then we transition to fight for them to be convicted. I help lead an organization called Real Justice, where we oust horrible district attorneys all over the country and replace them with compassionate people who are connected to the community, who want to see, just as my brother Lewis is here, to see mass incarceration cut down at least by 50%. We're aiming for even higher numbers now. So thank all of you. I stand in solidarity with each of you. If there's ever anything that I can do, not just with everybody who's on the stream, but for all of those who are watching, please reach out to me. It's my honor to be here. I may have to go in just a few minutes, and so if I do cut out, just know it. I do have to go in a few, but I'm so grateful for each of you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So, so that was quite a bit to get through. So the first question is going to be for Dr. Bertha. You know, you are from Ghana, and can you just kind of give us, like, you know, some background? I know, like, with social media and the things that's been happening, you know, social media will do so much to our Indigenous peoples, you know, and what's been happening in Africa, you know, and in other parts of the world, in the African diaspora. What can you give us an update on the work that you're doing, and you know, tell us some facts?
Okay, so thank you very much. Let me start with some basics before I get into Africa. Otherwise, it's to be sort of like jumping the gun. So first of all, I just want to spend maybe a few minutes just educating you what is the coronavirus. So there are about 4,000 viruses. The things that infect humans, we all know different diseases. We have diabetes, hypertension, thyroid disease. These are things that start from the inside of us. Sometimes they're related to our habits or whatever we may be dealing with. But then we have infectious diseases, which come about because you have all these other organisms that are fighting with the human race, so to speak. And one class as the viruses, they include things like hepatitis C, HIV, and all these. So the coronaviruses were first discovered in 1960 when 2 of them were found to cause the common cold. And then in 1980, 2 more were found. And so there were 4 of them. Now they're animal viruses and they're human viruses. The animal viruses don't cross over to infect humans because they just don't have the key to open the door to human cells. Now, in 2003, in China, an animal virus called the coronavirus, which they later named SARS, was shown to have crossed over to infect humans. Essentially, it developed the key to be able to open human cells and cause disease. And the disease pretty much looks like this COVID-19 because it caused a rapid respiratory illness, which gave people shortness of breath, but the mortality was higher. About 3 out of every 10 people who developed this infection died, and they thought it came from a coronavirus that infects a civet. It's a type of a small mammal. So they were able to overcome it. And then in 2012, in the Middle East, they also noticed another outbreak, which they call the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. It was also caused by a coronavirus. This time it came from camels. And so that one had an even higher mortality, 60%, meaning 6 out of every 10 people who got this infection will literally die. And so that is actually still in transmission at this point. The SARS outbreak died completely. And then in December, the Chinese noticed something unusual. Now you have to remember the Chinese people experienced the SARS outbreak. So they had the antenna really high for anything that causes a massive amount of people to be coming to the hospital with a respiratory illness. And so they noticed something SARS-like. And a few doctors started tweeting and talking about it in what they call the WeChat. And when they did that, the Chinese authorities pretty much sent the police to warn them that, charge them with the crime. Some of you fight against injustice. They were charged with the crime of spreading false rumors. But by December 31st, they couldn't hide it any longer because there was a lot more people getting affected. So as we enter the new year, the Chinese authorities informed the World Health Organization that they think they might be having an outbreak. And so on January 1st, the WHO sent a message around that it looks like we have a respiratory illness. At that time, they didn't think there was human to human transmission. It was causing fever, shortness of breath, chills, and then a large number of people were coming into the hospital. And unfortunately, some were dying. And it's sad to say that one of the doctors who blew the whistle that this might be a respiratory illness that looks like SARS, succumbed to the disease and he died. And our hearts go out to him. But what is this virus and what does it do? So I'm going to use a little illustration. This is just a simple rubber bag. I put a battery in it to represent the virus. And I'm going to use this Ziploc bag as a human cell. And so pretty much what happens is that this virus is a respiratory illness, meaning it goes from person to person when people talk, cough, etc., when someone is infected. Now, it only targets the lung cells, okay? And I'm going to use this sponge to represent the lungs. You see how soft it is? And I'm going to rip it apart so that it doesn't make so much noise. But the lungs are supposed to be this soft, okay? So this virus has receptors for the lung cells. It doesn't have receptors for anything else, but this one, at least at this time. So it targets the cell, it gets in there, and pretty much commands it to start making multiple copies of its own self. And so first of all, it attaches to what we call the ACE receptor. It gets in there, makes several copies, and on its way out, it literally rips the cell wall and takes an envelope with it. So it's called an envelope virus, okay? Now, this envelope is literally like the same cell membrane that covers your human cell in your lung tissue. And that is why they ask us to wash our hands with soap and water, because soap will break down this envelope. It's very susceptible to soap. Similarly, anything above 60% alcohol or isopropyl alcohol would also literally melt this envelope, which is why we're asking people to use hand sanitizers. Secondly, because it's a respiratory virus, we're also asking people to use masks. And the idea is that if you use a mask, when somebody is ill and they cough, a lot of the virus will stop, the mask will stop the virus. And if you're not ill, you're less likely to inhale the virus. And so what does it do? So this sponge is soft and nice. When the virus gets into the cells, it starts releasing a lot of what we call inflammatory cells that literally turn the sponge. It's almost like you've dipped the sponge in glue or in some starchy material or make it gelatin. So the oxygen that used to be able to go through the lungs cannot go through. And so people start getting short of breath. And we found that now it gets to every part of the body, the brain, the lung. It's even been found in the semen. So what we also found that 80% of people who get this infection, it'll be a mild illness, but mild is relative. Some people have high-grade fevers, some have a dry cough, some have bodily aches, and then 20% of people would get a pneumonia and be so ill that they need to be admitted to the hospital. 5% of people would also require mechanical ventilation because, like I was telling you, instead of having a soft, spongy lung, it becomes hard so that oxygen cannot get through. And that is why people require mechanical ventilators. So what happened? By January 28th, the World Health Organization visited China. At that time, only 98 people outside of China had the disease. It was mostly a
Dr. Bertha, I'm going to be. I didn't want to just, cut you off, but we do, for the sake of time, we really want to Africa. Yes, because there's a lot of information that we do need to hear from some of our other Indigenous leaders as well.
Okay, I'll jump to Africa right away. So Africa first got the disease on February 14th. A Chinese national came to Egypt and Africa reported its first case. And on February 28th, Nigeria had a traveler from Italy come in. And since then, there have been lots and lots and lots of cases, and Africa is getting close to 45 to almost 50,000 at this time. And the Africa CDC is working hard to try and contain this disease from a continental perspective. And so they formed on February 22nd, the ministers of health came together to form what they call the African Task Force to fight coronavirus. They formed a task force, and I'm part of the clinical management technical group of this task force. And what we're trying to do is to help every country give directions, make sure that we can, those who don't have the means to buy the equipment or the testing would be able to have it. And so we're looking to raise $400 million. And I just want you to know that Africa does have a Centers for Disease Control that is coordinating all this activity. And so far, Africa has only 0.05% of the cases in the world. And so Africa has very, very few cases at this time. So I'm going to stop at this point so that I'll listen to other presentations. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I just jumped in.
Hey, everyone. I want to apologize for coming in late. I just drove in from Brunswick, Georgia, on the front lines, being right there where Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia was just murdered by 2 white supremacists. And so, as you all know, you all are all on the front line, all amazing people. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be a part of the Indigenous peoples movement, from smallpox to COVID. Let's heal each other. So thank you so much for having everyone on. And so I give it to you, Shanae.
Thank you. So I actually, I really wanted to get some real information about, because we are international. So our news here in the United States sometimes segments things. So we don't really get to hear directly from frontline people in other places. So I really wanted to ask questions to you, Dara, about, how is it that, as an activist and as someone that, is passionate and does things for her people, how can you get the voice of the unheard so far away here to us? Because that's what this Indigenous peoples movement about. How do you navigate through that to get what's happening there here for us to know?
So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. So very nice to meet you. And well, here in Brazil, we are facing a really hard situation. We have a government that is, sorry for my English, that is declared anti-Indigenous, and that has a very severe speech of hate against Indigenous peoples. And we are in action forever. And when the coronavirus crisis began, it was not only the virus that began coming to our communities, as the national leaders were saying today, we have a virus of the invasion of our territories, mining exploitation, the deforestation is growing. We are having several kinds of different attacks on our territories. And something to understand about Brazil specifically is that we are a really large country, and we are not only in the Amazon forest, we are in the whole territory. And there are some places in our territories where you can find people living in the borders of the highways and facing bounty killers and fires and all kind of situation. And so during April, we began the Red April. We have the national mobilization, the national movement began a campaign of communication using the social media and this internet technologies to try to get communication between indigenous leaders and talk about the situation in our territory. So we began with the Red April, and then we had an online activity that is the Free Land Camp, that is our major assembly, National Assembly, that we do annually here in Brasilia, where we gather more than 4,000 indigenous leaders from many indigenous nations. And so as we couldn't go out from our villages, we did it online, and it led us to build a more wide net of communication, not only here in the country, but also with our supporters worldwide. And so now in these days, during these days is happening the Assembly of Resistance is like another event, like we are just doing an event after another online. And this this Assembly of Resistance has the main objective to try to articulate what we can do to face the COVID crisis, because the major problem is that we deal with the absence of the state. We deal with the absence of all the politics that were built in our constitutional spaces or in international spaces. Is never respected, and we are the most I need to think in Portuguese, sorry. It's almost, we are the most fragile group in society. We have very little access to health policies, and when and as the government that is not just anti-indigenous, he is the actual president of Brazil, which name I won't say because it's unpronounceable. It's like Voldemort or something. He
it's really good. Indigenous people from around the world.
The president is in denial of the gravity of this pandemic. He denies. He says it's just a little flu, and we have all the ministers of human rights, minister of culture, minister of health, minister of agriculture, minister of economic. They are all deniers of the COVID. And they have a very severe speech in the sense of hiding the gravity, hiding the actual situation. So we have como é que fala? Peraí, wait a minute. Como é que fala? They are not counting well the numbers of people that is dying. We are having a crisis with the communication, with the journal, with the press, and all the medias. And so there's a lot of things that we are facing. We face like the lack of water, the lack of transportation for the people that is ill, the lack of equipment, help equipment, the lack of tests, the lack of food. So mainly all the indigenous nations in Brazil are trying to do crowdfunding because food is beginning to end, and so we are trying to articulate, and it's the most important debate in this moment, in all the complexity and diversity of the indigenous movement in Brazil, is to understand what we can do to try to communicate, try to have a dialogue with the government, that is an anti-government, that is anti-democratic, that is anti-indigenous, that is in denial of all this situation, and we are doing international campaigns. We are going into national and international tribunals to try to force the government to attend the indigenous population, but we know that is not enough, because we have a president that when we reach like 5,000 deaths, he just said, so what?
Okay, wow.
So that's kind of the panorama here.
That is horrible. You know, in the spirit of our sister, what was her name in Brazil that was slaughtered?
Sonia.
We are standing with all of you all down there. What is a call to action that we can do to support you all in Brazil, in the Amazon?
Okay, so we have the APIB, that is the Brazilian Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil, which Sonia is one of the directors. And I can share with you a link that we are having to find support. Of course, we have many different resources for support, juridical support, international support. But what is being discussed during these days is the importance to find other alternatives that are not just from the state, in the way that, as for example, there is this photographer, this really famous photographer that is going worldwide with a campaign saying that we need to force the government to recognize the indigenous nations and etc. That is really important to sensibilize people, but that doesn't really give an immediate support and strategical support to what is happening right now. We have nations that are really beginning to face what we can call a genocide. We have populations where it is already there. We have populations that are uncontacted in the forest. We have really we have difficulty to make our relatives, our indigenous relatives, to understand what the hell is the COVID. We already lost 2 indigenous doctors, and you as indigenous know how much effort we needed to have these young doctors, and they are dying because they don't have any support. So we are trying to get some support and money to try to have these equipments, to try to have access to the tests, to the necessary medications, and also to support the communities that are beginning to face hunger, because mainly of the indigenous population live with selling their art craft, and or their production, and in this situation, even the health professionals, even our supporters represent a danger of contamination for us. As for example, the first indigenous that died was from the Yanomami nation, that is a really isolated nation. And in this contamination happens because of illegal mining. The contamination is happening because of the people that is not respecting the law, like all the traffic possible, the human traffic, the wood traffic, the animal traffic, the gold traffic, whatever. Those people are just taking the opportunity to go further and attack our territories, and the state is not having any intention to control this situation.
So you're able to see, so basically through this virtual time, you're actually being able to see an increase in support internationally with the virtual space.
Yes, I think for the last years, like especially with the arrival of this kind of coup d'etat in Brazil, we are making an enormous effort to have a worldwide visibility that is really necessary here in Brazil. But we are really facing an absence of democracy. And so in my opinion, in my personal opinion, we really need to think about what kind of action, like a practical action, we can build together. Of course, in a kind of space like this, where I really want to know more about your reality. I don't know. I am a communicator. I am an indigenous journalist. Here is my altar. Here is my altar. I try to learn with you. I try to follow what you are going through, because we know that we share the same story.
So that's what this is for. That's what this. That's why we wanted to have as many people, and it's so hard because I know that we all have a lot to say. But I do ask that if you guys could
and
just
so
if you could just kind of consolidate just a little bit of it, because the
thing is just follow the APIB in the medias. We are having many campaigns. We are trying to connect in several spaces, and that is the main media where we are communicating what is happening here in Brazil. Thank you so much for the space.
Thank you so much, and that was great information. And I feel that there's so many commonalities in what she said in regards to what all Indigenous people are dealing with. Reverend Yearwood and Madonna, she was talking about how there is mining happening in Indigenous communities in the midst of COVID, which is crazy. I'm happy Nikki is on as well. This question is for Nikki, Rev, Madonna. Just go ahead and raise your hand if you're like, I'm going to take this. But why? Help me understand, in the midst of COVID, in the midst of a pandemic, why and how do they have the audacity to be coming into our lands on environmental in the midst of this? What is happening, and how are you all dealing with this in regards to environmental justice in the midst of pandemic and COVID? Anyone could take it. Madonna, Nikki, Reverend Yearwood.
I'll let my sisters go first, but I'll definitely chime in.
Thank you.
I'll talk.
Madonna, the warrior woman. I'm so happy you're on.
Thank you. Well, it's just amazing to me to see all you young people, and I feel honored to be here. Yeah, that question seems to get asked quite a bit, and to me, I don't know if I'm being oversimplistic or just lived too damn long. I don't know, but the way I look at it is it's an ongoing thing. Each generation has the same struggle. We don't have any new issues, you know. We're indigenous to this land. That covers all of it. So each generation has to pick up this struggle. Each generation has to take the responsibility. It's not new. None of this is new. It's just got new names. Now it's COVID, you know, the black snake, you know, the pipelines. All of that is just new names. And, you know, because we are indigenous and most of us are land-based, I mean, there you have it. You know, it's survival in this modern day. So and maybe I oversimplify sometimes, but I think, you know, you just have to, you know, moccasins on the ground, you know, there's no time. We just have to listen to each other and just get the energy. And that's what I'm doing today. I'm listening and I'm getting energy from you young people, you know, and just know your history and know your homeland and know your base, and then the issues are right there, and then you will know what to do because you have your ancestors behind you and your elders.
Palamaya, thank you. Nikki, what does it look like in Canada? We're getting call to actions people are right there on the ground still building. Kanahus is going to be on our second segment. She said that, you know, I'm at Tiny Warrior Camp. You was right there with the youth. You was right there documenting, being with these frontline activists, the water protectors, the land protectors in Canada. What is happening in Canada?
So we leading up, like, because of the invasion on Wet'suwet'en territory that brought in military grade tactical units, snipers, K9 units, and everything to actually take people at gunpoint off of their own territory, starting in early January, there was a call to action put out by the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs to organize across Canada. And just because of that timing, we've actually been very fortunate in Canada that we were shutting down railroads, we were shutting down shipping centers, we would shut down major highways for the beginning of the COVID spread. So with no thanks from the Canadian state, we have probably minimized just in terms of like spread and exposure by the millions, because that's what we were doing all the way from the West Coast to Mohawk territory, is actually shutting down those main routes for Indigenous rights and sovereignty, and just really demonstrating that breaching of our basic human rights is no longer going to be something that we sit by and participate in terms of the colonial state. Because of that as well, we were organizing a lot of early communication in the stages of this disease first coming up. The group that I'm involved with, actually just 2 blocks from where I sit right now, we had held the government parliamentary building for nearly a month in terms of occupying it at that point. And so there was youth from 34 different nations that were united in one place. And so sadly, that meant that we like pretty much overnight went from being in a state where we'd actually created a new little village site down here and brought a ton of community together, had to move almost directly overnight into forms of isolation because we didn't really understand what we were dealing with. However, since then, within the first 2 weeks of what was going on, almost every First Nation in British Columbia, which is the province where I live in, because of our specific colonial history and reserve system, we're actually able to close their reservations from any outsiders, which has meant that the spread of COVID within Indigenous communities has been really minimized, other than one community that my partner Siam, who is just right here with me, where it's a mixed community and on an island, and so the white mayor brought COVID to the island, and unfortunately now there's 34 members of her nation that have been exposed. Other than that one community, we've been able to keep COVID almost out of every one of the 198 Indigenous communities in British Columbia. And there's, to the best of my knowledge, the last number that we had for all of Canada was only 94 cases in Canada. However, the main thing, that's just been a very clear realization ultimately during this time, is that the Canadian government, which is a petro state, is utilizing this as an opportunity to railroad through its own commitments to so-called reconciliation, prior and informed consent with nations. This is actively shipping men into man camps along the determined pipeline routes for both CGL and Trans Mountain, as well as up further north here for Site C Dam. And so they're not, they're using the RCMP basically as like a private military to deal with any kind of opposition, at the same time as they're forcing through untested and unquarantined individuals to be adjacent to some of the most vulnerable communities that we have, communities that don't have running water, communities that are hours and hours away from a medical facility, and communities that are under provided in terms of personal protective equipment. So what our group has been doing is actually switching on and off along those pipeline routes with drones and cameras to document what's actually going on in those man camps, as well as along the land base when they're moving through without any permission and without any oversight. And Canada's really embracing this as an opportunity to have everyone diverted to a single issue, and undermining all of their commitments in terms of what sovereignty looks like for Indigenous people, and even what our commitments are in regards to public health when you're actually busing through untested, unquarantined men through the hundreds into some of the most remote and vulnerable regions of our province. So that's where we're at here.
That's amazing. Nikki is off the chain. We're going to come back to you, Nikki. We're going to come back to all of you all those have already spoken, to just give us a quick call to action towards the end. Reverend Yearwood, the man that has been all around this world. You are the founder of the Hip Hop Caucus, and everyone just thinks that hip hop is just entertainment. Hip hop is just, that you just bring rappers together to vote. But what a lot of people do not know is that you have been on this front line fighting environmental injustices all over the world. And during this time of COVID, you've been boots on the ground. I already know you virtually, your boots on the ground too, as we've all been quarantining. But what is the hip hop community and the demographic and the people that you work with dealing with this COVID? And then also, how are you looking at what's going to happen from here? Where do we go in regards to fighting this environmental fight post-COVID?
Well, my sister, let me just first say, you are one of the most amazing artivists that I know. The combination of the artist and the activist put together, that is you. You are a powerful sister. I just want to encourage you and all that you do. I kind of want to take Sister Madonna's slogan there, moccasins on the ground. I'm about to get a hat that says that. That's my next hat. That was super dope. I think we need to understand this. You asked an important question. If we leave with nothing else, let's understand that there are Zoom conferences that are happening on the other side as well. And they're having conferences about how to dismantle our communities at this time. They're not looking at this moment to save us or to protect us. They are having these exact same little box on the screen Zoom conferences, trying to figure out what they can do to further hurt our people. And so we understand, and that's happening from the environmental standpoint. EPA has rolled back regulations regarding clean air and clean water. One of the main things that contributes to COVID-19 and the coronavirus is air quality. And they are literally rolling that back. They are literally rolling that back right now as we speak. They are bailing out all their friends. The stock market is not crashing. So you would think that with all that's going on, with now literally over 30 million people unemployed, that the stock market would mirror that. That's not happening because the money is going to them first. We have got to understand they are literally happy about what is happening in many quarters. They're not sad what's happening. They're saying that, listen, more people of color, more red people, more black people, more brown people are being affected by this virus. And they are literally saying, well, fine, open up. That's okay. Go to the nail salon, go to the massage parlor and do these things. And so we have to understand that first and foremost, that we are literally fighting for our lives. The second thing that you made a point of that's so important right now is this. The issue, we've begun to see more people of color who are being assassinated by the police state, even though we saw, for instance, we saw people outside the Michigan State House with guns up there going off and doing their shout to folks in Detroit and around who stood up to that nonsense, but they had guns. But if we are literally jogging or running, we are live streaming our death. So on top of that, we're now dealing with the fact that we can't have clean air, we can't have clean water, we're losing our jobs, we're being assassinated, we're being pushed to the sides. This is a moment in which they are looking at it differently than we are. And so we have to mobilize differently. We have to do things differently in a way that's not the same. So please, for all of the activists, if when I leave here, I'm going to say another word, I need to encourage you for a second. If you thought you were tired in 2019 or 2018, you have got to take your vitamin C, your vitamin A, drink your tea, burn your sage to get ready for this moment. 2020 is the year of truth. It is the year in which they are saying they can finally annihilate people of color in this country. And we must stand up to that madness. And so Hip Hop Caucus is doing something right now because we believe that we must use our cultural expression to shape our political experience. And so I mentioned earlier, my good brother TC Muhammad, who is out here making sure I gave the fist, we all gave the for TC earlier, so make sure we give up love for brother Muhammad. But we have a Rona Resilience Roundtable that we're doing on May 13th. Please put that on your calendars. Rona Resilience Roundtable. It'd be at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And that would be, if you just go to ronaroundtable.eventbrite.com. That's ronaroundtable.eventbrite.com. We would love to have you all a part of that conversation. But more importantly, we are fighting for our lives. So in the great words of Dr. Dorothy Height, my mentor, this is not a time for egos or who gets credit or what. This is a time that we literally have to put everything to side to fight for, not only for us, but for our babies. Let me end with this. 100 years from now, and I say this a lot in different quarters, but I want to say it tonight. 100 years from now, none of us actually on this Zoom call will be here. We will have all joined the ancestors. But what will be here, if they are around, our children will thank us because they will say that group in 2020 fought for their lives. They now have clean air. They now have clean water. They have a reservation that is powerful, that has schools and healthcare. We have our urban community, that we have people of color who are flourishing. They will look back upon this moment and these calls, my sister, you, Nazahai, and all of my dear sisters and brothers on this call, they look back upon this call and this opportunity and say, thank you for what you are doing to fight for our people. So God bless you all. And in the words of hip hop, can't stop, won't stop.
Won't stop. Thank you so much, Rev. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Shanae. And you know what? I want to say this really quick. I mean, this is so much information, and I hate that we have put it such in a tight time frame. But this is just part one. We have to do a part two because the information that everyone is sharing does need its own workshops, masterclass. So we're going to have to continue to do this as a part two. And I think we're going to have to do part two, right, Shanae? I think we're going to have to do a part two and do this because there's so much information and so I'll shut up because we're tight on time, but we're going to keep it moving. We're going to keep it going. Thank you so much. You got to unmute yourself. We're going to get used to this technology.
I've always been using these for work, not necessarily for the live aspect of it. So this question is for you, Carmen, and you, Louis, and kind of in lieu of pretty much what has taken place today, right? And also what Reverend Yearwood was talking about, right now, and same thing with what Nikki was saying, a lot of the things, but with police brutality, things like that are happening like all the time, despite what's happening. And the narrative has been taken away from us. So how is the work that you guys are doing, how are you navigating through these challenges in media? Because for the past 3 months, if it's not about COVID, they're not talking about it. They dropped the ball on everything, but they're still, genociding us as a people. And we're like binded in our houses. We can't do anything in a sense. We're not legally supposed to, leave our houses without masks or things like that. How are you, as leaders within the work that you're doing, navigating through this? Because, it's what you guys are doing is beginning to go viral. People really stood up today for their brother's birthday and his family, because we work together virtually to do that. So how are you guys moving through the challenges of, getting our voices heard and demanding justice?
And that could be for you, Carmen, and then we'll go into that same question with prison reform, Lewis. So Carmen.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's so great to just listen to all the different opinions and stories and what's happening across the world. This conversation does need to continue because it's so informative. But, one of the things that I come to this space with prior to getting on this call was the fact that I had just left the hospital because I had an ultrasound. And, as somebody who's pregnant under COVID, there's no prenatal care. And so when they finally call you to tell you, hey, you could come in because you're at 20 weeks, we need to measure the baby, you jump. But one of the things that's happening is the fact that as I'm going to the hospital for visits, we can't have our spouses or our children with us. So I'm going into the hospital alone. And so what ends up happening is my husband is rotating or driving around to make sure that our baby could fall asleep. And as I was calling and texting him to come get me, he wasn't responding, which is, which is very rare for my husband to not respond to me. And so I looked down the street and he's pulled over by police. And I got really scared because we know what happens when Black men are stopped by police. We know that oftentimes they don't make it out. And I began to wave so that the police could see that he was actually there for me. And so there's just this fear that we have. And so when we think about this on the larger scale, we consistently advocate for maybe folks that we've never met, right? But in reality, we're advocating for our own husbands and for our own children. We know that this has happened to our brothers. I was asking myself, why is it weighing so heavy? My husband made it safe, so did my baby. And it's because I remember my brothers being hogtied and held at gunpoint when I was younger, coming out of a basketball game because they fit the description. And so every single day we're waking up, and this is not anything new. Reverend Yearwood, when you were speaking, I was getting emotional because you're preaching, right? You're essentially saying to our people around the world, the fact that this, in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, we were waking up every single day to an incident of police violence. And we were marching on the streets. We were showing up to Baltimore. We were shutting down the West Side Highway in New York. We were showing up to Ferguson. There was Black Lives Matter that was born out of this movement, right? Out of this necessity to ensure that as, people are saying Latino lives or Indigenous, that we were also naming the fact that Black people were being killed, and they were being killed all over the world, right? This happens in Brazil. This happens in Germany with Afro-Germans. It happens in Venezuela. It happens all over the world where our African descendant, our siblings are being killed because of state violence. And so, I think about just the power of our people on a virtual basis of what's been able to happen. But what I remember happened in 2017 is that we got so consumed with Trump's narcissism that we forgot that people were being killed at the hands of police. And so it was being disguised as though there was no more police killings, but in reality there was, right? And I also am witnessing this happening in the Latino community. But what I also find is the fact that, again, we have to show up in solidarity for one another. We have to understand that once Black Lives Matter, or once Black people are free, our people will be free. And so it's been, I will say, as a pregnant woman in her 5 months, I feel like really emotional about this, where I have to say in 2016 and 2017, I really developed this like thick skin to deal with police brutality. But I think that our organizations are adjusting in a way where, one, we want there to be this sense of accountability for all communities. What we're seeing in New York is we're seeing our Black communities being over-policed by police officers, being thrown down, being brutally beaten by police officers. But then down the West Side Highway on the West Side, on Lower Manhattan, you're seeing white people being allowed to sit freely in a park, or you're allowed to see the Hasidic Jewish community show up in thousands or hundreds for a funeral without any social distancing. So what we're just asking is for the same type of rights that other communities have, right? What we're asking is for, you know, when I think about, you know, even being a Chicana woman, the impact of COVID and what it has on our Mexican community, when, you know, I look at Mexico and there's no reports of COVID as it pertains to the community, right? We know that there are large incidents of COVID, but also in the state of Zacatecas, where my mother's from, not only is that community impacted by COVID, but it's also being riddled by bullets because of the violence that happens in Mexico. When I think about Mexican Americans here in the US, or Latinos, 16.6% of the deaths in the US are Latinos. And that's just, and that's a skewed number. And I will say this because oftentimes we Latinos don't ever show up to the hospital, right? We don't have health care. My parents were farm workers growing up. And so obviously they weren't reporting things because they, you know, family members don't want to get deported. But also the reason why the Latino community is being impacted so largely by COVID is because a lot of our Latino community members are essential workers, right? They're farm workers, they're janitors, they're the ones that are out there when people want the luxury of getting their nails done. It's some of the folks that are out there needing to get, you know, show up to also prepare the food for the restaurants. And so we're seeing, you know, the fact that a lot of families, who are out there giving us nutrition and food aren't able to also get that same type of treatment of themselves. There is a young woman by the name of Genevieve Flores Jaro who works with MyCop, the indigenous community out of Oxnard, who speaks Zapotec and Mixtec, right? What she was saying is the fact that oftentimes information is shared and it's not shared in indigenous language. It's only shared in English and Spanish. She was also talking about the farm workers not having access to food, not having access to rice and beans because all that that type of food was taken from the grocery stores immediately. She was also talking about the lack of health care that our farm workers don't have. And the fact, and I remember this from my parents, my mother was a monolingual Spanish speaker. And I remember my mother could never help me with my homework, let alone figure out how to use a Zoom call so that I could be on there for 9 hours, right? So again, there's a lot of things that's impacting our community during COVID, as well as the police brutality is we're seeing this rise, this escalation. And what people like Mayor de Blasio, and I will only speak for New York, is saying, stay home. We heard him say, stay home in 2016 with the officers were killed by somebody who came from Baltimore. He told us to stay home, but we're not going to stay home. It's not about staying home at this moment when you are killing our babies, right? So talking about 100 years from now, I know that people like Sarah and other folks from indigenous communities talk about the next 7 generations, right? What are we leaving for them? And so I also want to mention the women that are in our prisons. I know that we don't have enough time, so I'm going to try to wrap it up quickly, but we keep on getting calls from women in prisons, from Folsom Prison, from Coachella. Women are telling us that the people, the correctional officers are so corrupt, right? The trans women that are in these prisons are being mistreated, are being targeted. The women are being woken up in the middle of the day to clean out their cells and being sent to another facility in Bakersfield so that it could look like they're social distancing, so that correctional officers could actually take photos and send it to the governor and say they are social distancing. But before COVID-19, there was already a lawsuit of overcrowding in our prisons. We could potentially do social distancing in prisons if the population was at 80%, right? But it's not, it's at 150% overpopulated. So, you know, I wanted to touch on those 3, but what we're doing at the Gathering for Justice is that we're really trying to take the time to cultivate our young people so that they could lead us. So we're doing town halls, you know, we're having conversations about bail reform. bill rollbacks in the state of New York and also in California with folks as well from Texas. But really, it's about the next generation. Mr. Belafonte, I love the quote that Madonna said, right? You generation are responsible for yourself. Our mentor and boss, Harry Belafonte, always shared with us the words of Paul Robeson, where he said, each generation is responsible for their liberation. And so I take that with heart, because that's what we're trying to do, is to cultivate young people to be responsible for their own liberation. And so thank you again so much for the time. I know I said a lot, but I was trying to get things out, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Carmen, co-founder, founder of Gathering for Justice. Thank you. Louis, talk to us. Louis is Cut 50, part of the Cut 50 family that I'm a part of, which is Van Jones' organization.
Right.
He's a national community organizer. Louis is probably the only person in here that has been face to face with President Donald Trump to ask him.
Well, I think that's a great space to ground us.
Yes.
In my comments and in my reflections. Right.
Yes.
We at Cut 50 and the individuals by whom we work with, we are more concerned about outcomes than we are about outrage. We use the opportunity as relates to the First Step Act, while other people were outside with staves and knives and machetes and the likes thereof, talking about burn, baby, burn, rightfully so. We walked up to the back door and we said, listen, we want to have a sensible, we want to have an equitable conversation about how we can move this issue as it relates to criminal justice reform forward. Fast forward almost 18 months later, we have successfully been able to get about 8,000 people free under the First Step Act alone. People such as my homies, Lyle and Lonnie Jones, brothers who were sentenced respectively to 1 life sentence in prison and up to 3 life sentences in prison. Now, I'm not saying that the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the second coming of the Christ. But what I am saying is that we had to look at things differently in order to produce a different outcome. I also want to stretch out what my sister Carmen talked about in terms of asking for something. Back in 1968, the night before MLK was assassinated, he said something that still, in my mind, resonates down the corridors of time, even on this day in May of 2020. He said, all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If these issues were happening over in Russia or a totalitarian country, maybe he could understand the rationale, because they hadn't committed themselves to liberty and justice for all over there. If this had happened in a space where this is some type of dictatorship, then maybe we could rationalize it, because they hadn't committed to themselves to the notion of equity over there. But somewhere he read in the freedom of assembly, somewhere he read that in the freedom of speech and in the freedom of liberty and justice for all, that didn't necessarily mean a notion that was exclusive to those who were in positions of privilege, power, authority, so on and so forth, but it should have been inclusive, whether or not you were in the projects in Harlem and or whether or not you were in the White House on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And so what my position is this. Look, I did almost 14 years in federal prison. I know what it's like to be on the inside. I'm still in contact with more than 350 people nationwide who are reporting to us literally day in and night out. Louis, you got to do something. I talked to a brother probably about 3 weeks or so ago who talked about how him being incarcerated, he was exhibiting signs of COVID-19, went to medical. When he went to medical, not only did he have a copay, and he's considered indigent, not only did he have a copay in order to be treated for COVID-19, but when he got down there, here's the thing, when he got down there, medical gave him some ice chips to chew on so that they can manipulate his temperature reading. Lo and behold, here it is. We fast forward to 3 weeks later, and unfortunately, that brother had passed away 48 hours after he was released. He was only 26 years old. So I know what it's like to literally be in a space of confinement. I know what it's like to be in a forced space of social distancing. I know what it's like to be in a space where you feel as though that literally Hurricane Katrina is about to breach on the medical levees of your life and you are going to be drowned out. And so, look, I am ecstatic to be on this call. I'm ecstatic to be having my voice amplified and contribute value to this conversation, but we got to do more. And what is the more that we have to do? How are we going to do it? All of us are going to have different methodologies, but I think that all of us have the same outcome. The same outcome is liberty and justice for all, not for some, not for the privileged in the Hamptons, not for those individuals who are in Greenwich, Connecticut, not for those people who are in Bel Air, California. This is for the people who are on the west side of Chicago's, the Bridgeports of Connecticut, the Brooklyns of New York, the Comptons of California, and everywhere in between. We need liberty and justice for all. So look, this is what we're asking you at Cut 50 to do. You can go to cut50.org/empathy in action. Empathy in action. We want to make sure that our empathy has some action to it. And if I was going to tap into my Pentecostal preaching roots just a little bit, one of the things I'll be talking about is the writer in the Gospel of James, the Gospel according to James, where he said, "You show me your faith without works, and I'm going to show you my faith by my works." He said, you can have an anemic, you might have a high blood pressure in conversation, but I'm going to be anemic in conversation, and I'm going to be high in my deeds. So how we can add value to who we are as a nation, how we can add value to the conversation as it relates to criminal justice reform, as it relates to social activism, as it relates to environmental reform, as it relates to everything in between, we can put our empathy into action. And that's going to look different. It's going to sound different. It may feel different. But the fact of the matter is that when we convene back in spaces like this, we are going to have a COVID-19 update. Carmen is going to be reporting back to Rev that as a result of the action that she called her folks to take, then we got X amount of people who we don't have to read about, who were killed in the streets. I'm going to be reporting back to Yanazda that as a result of the action that we took on this call, that there are X amount of people who are not necessarily in custody today. The Rev is going to be able to report back to Elder Madonna that the individuals who are in his community, in his tribe, that they are better off as a result of us having this conversation. So again, you can go to cut50.org/empathy in action. We will make an impact, and we will fight with anyone against anything that is going to advance the betterment of who we are as a people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know we're like squeezing time, you guys, but it was just ironic because, you know, how you mentioned that he might be the only person that, you know, has actually seen Trump face to face. We actually, at Shinnecock, right there in New York, Lance has actually, and that kind of poses my next question, is specifically for you, Lance. You know, you have been in leadership position, an official leadership position, like an elected leadership position for not only the Shinnecock Indian Nation, but our region and the nation as a whole, representing Indian country. So you have dealt with administration after administration after administration after administration as an actual dignitary on a local level, a state level, and a federal level. So at this point, because we are here, you know, and you have had, you know, face-to-face conversations with different administrations at different levels, what type of advice can you give us as young leaders that are rising, whether we're leaders officially, you know, elected leaders of our tribes or leaders within, you know, different organizations? What type of advice can you give us, you know, as we're, you know, trying to create government to government relationships? Mute. Can't hear you.
You got to unmute your thing. Sorry.
Oh, okay. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
No, I think, you know, it's an interesting question because I think the brother that was just talking about, you know, and everyone has been talking about a call to action. But I think that one of the key points in any call to action is the consistency of it. and pounding that pavement, whether it's, pounding the pavement on the Hill, in DC, talking with your politicians. I have had face-to-face conversations with Donald Trump on numerous occasions when he was trying to sell us some land here at Shinnecock, to, his position now as president. And it all goes back to, the have and the have-nots. I mean, it's really the bottom line. You have those who have and want to keep it, and you have those who are trying to get it. And the issue becomes who is going to, stand up and really talk the loudest. It comes down to persistence overcoming resistance. And it for us, as Native people, I looked at your title, and you talked about, the smallpox and everything. 400 years. We're a first contact tribe here on the East Coast, and all of the East Coast tribes. So we've been dealing with this for 400 years, and talking about, survival and how do we survive, and what is the mechanisms to survive. And we have been creative. We have been ingenuitive in trying to make that happen. What you look at right now, what's going on with our brothers up at Mashpee, here we're in the middle of this virus. The federal government steps in and says, well, we're going to take your land. We're going to take your land out of trust. You look at what happened out at Standing Rock, with the DAPL and the pipeline. You look at all of these things that are happening around the country, and it takes a movement. It takes, if you go back to the 60s and you go back to Dr. King, and what precipitated, the movement? People coming together, but it was all different people. It wasn't just, it just wasn't African American. You had as many, Caucasian people, as many, Latino people. You had all types of people in these marches, and it takes that voice. It takes getting that exposure, and that's one of the things that was so impressive about the pipeline. I mean, for the first time in history, you had all of these tribes coming together across the United States. I know we trooped all the way across the country to stand at Standing Rock. You were with us. We all rode together, and these are the kind of things that I think it goes to being heard and getting those people who have influence to be a part of your coalitions or to be a part of your movements. We can stand and talk all we want to, but we're not the ones that they're going to listen to, no matter how much we try to do it. If you look at the Dr. King movements, who did you have in there? Yes, you had Dr. King, and you had, Jesse Jackson, and you had, the Reverend Abernathy, and you had all of these individuals, but you also had a lot of white people that were walking in those marches as well, and the meetings that he had with the President Johnson at the time. So if you look at history and how history has, formulated these movements where change has happened, it has always happened in unison with others, and it's one of the things that, sitting on the National Congress, I have made, a real push that we need to be, partnering with other organizations. We need to be partnering with the Anti-Jewish Defamation League. We need to be partnering with the NAACP. We need to have those relationships because it is about numbers. That's the bottom line. When it comes in, everything is said and done, it is about the numbers that you bring to the table, from the different walks of life, and it is that squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And if you don't do that, then, we can talk about these individual movements, but, when we were in DC for the Indigenous Peoples March, and you saw how many people, were out there marching. But what I didn't see was the real coverage of that by national media. How do we get that national media coverage? Here was this march, and I mean, you had everybody from all walks of life, talking and speaking right there, you know, in front of the Lincoln Memorial, but we didn't get that national coverage. So there has to be those mechanisms and those connections in those areas where we can facilitate that national coverage and get the voices heard for all of these, you know, endeavors, no matter what it is, whether it was, you know, look how much coverage the DAPL, the Standing Rock got, but how long did it take to get it when it first started? And for several months after, it wasn't national news, even though you had this encampment out there with hundreds of people talking about this. You had over almost 400 of the federal tribes, you know, that had come in unison, still didn't get that national coverage. So I think it's imperative that we understand, you know, how to play this game as well. And this game is played on their level. And so we have to play it on their level. And I don't think we do that more often than not. I think we have the individualism, the rallies and everything like that, but we're not playing on that level where we bring that national exposure to issues. Now with the advent of social media, it's a lot easier, you know, but look how long it took, you know, for an arrest to be made in Georgia down there. I mean, you're talking almost 2 months, 3 months now before, you know, there was actual arrest. What is it, February, March, April, May? Here we are in May, you know, before an actual arrest occurred down there. So when you look at these things, I think that, you know, we're not playing this game on their level. And it is a game, you know, and for me, it takes getting that national coverage, getting a Donald Trump, you know, and the conversations with him and helping, you know, well, there's no understanding. He's not going to understand anything. He's got his own agenda. And anybody that doesn't understand that is just fooling themselves. You know, his agenda is to provide for the people that are on his level, you know, the millionaires and the billionaires, and everybody else can just go to hell, basically. So when you understand that and look at what, you know, is really transpiring across the country here in all sectors, you know, whether it's the Latino sector, whether it's the Native American sector, you know, whether it's the African American sector, when you look at what's happening all across the country, it all points to a lack of exposure. We do not get that exposure unless you do something radical. And that is not the call. That is not how we should be doing it. I think that if we were to take a look at the game, how they do it, and match that or equal that, we would have a lot more success in some of the areas that we're doing. Right now, we're putting together for the Mashpee, you know, it's going to be called Stand With Mashpee. And there was a hashtag out there that was already talking about Stand With Mashpee. But if they're allowed to take this tribe's land out of trust and make this tribe a landless tribe, the ripple effect that we've witnessed for 400 years in this country, because everything goes from the east to the west. It ripples across the country. You know, when the first settlers came, where did they start? They started in the east here, and it rippled across the country. If we do not stand right now with the Mashpee Wampanoags, it has the potential for a lot of tribes to lose their land in this manner. Who weren't recognized prior to 1934, and that's another whole issue and a longer story. But the issue becomes, how do we protect our lands? How do we protect our people? How do we get our voices heard? And we have to do it in the same manner that these other entities have done it throughout history. We have to look to the past to move to the future. And I've always talked about this, but I don't think we do that enough to understand where we really need to be at this point in time. You know, there's movements all over the place, but a concerted effort to bring those movements together is what is needed to have the voices heard on a level. Even when you go to DC and you do these rallies, you know, like the Murdered and Indigenous Women's march that they had in DC. Where's the coverage? You don't.
You got muted somehow.
Mainstream America is not hearing the voice. And I think that's what we have to key on as we move forward.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. This next question is actually going to be for you, Roberto, because just kind of what Lance was saying, you also have experience on a leadership level, dealing with, being on an international treaty council. So as far as my question would be, from your experience, like how have you navigated through the challenges to create peace? You know what I'm saying? Between communities. I mean, you've come just, you came to our call to action when our ancestors were being desecrated in the hills of Southampton. You came and you said, perhaps maybe, there needs to be some peace and some treaties, looked at, some new peace and new treaties, so how have you been able to navigate through that?
Before you say that, Shanae, you got to give him a proper introduction because people are like, well, how does he give peace?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Tainos, I'm sorry. I had to, I'm not Taino, but I had to be like, we got to, our Tainos in the building.
Yeah, everybody did their introduction.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I did come in late. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here and just listening to everybody. I mean, there's so many important things. And as you said, not enough time, but the conversation needs to continue. Just taking on what Lance said, I think as Indigenous peoples, we have a far-ranging vision. COVID-19 has shown the world that the world is out of balance, right? And that we have to work towards that balance and harmony again. And the only way to do that is to, one, respect each other, respect all the relations. That means not only human relations, but the whole world around us, the environment, the animals, the spiritual realm. We have to get back in balance and we have to get in tune with all that. So one way that we do that as Indigenous peoples, as Taino, is to think about our ancestral teaching, our Indigenous knowledge that's been passed on from time immemorial. And one of the main things that we do when we say Oma Bahari, when we walk with respect, is we think about the term reciprocity. We can't just be a society that just keeps taking and taking without giving back. And so as we, look at the people who are on this call and across the movements, what are we taking and what are we giving back? How are we making connections? One thing that we've done with United Confederation of Taino Peoples, we've entered into a treaty with the Scattercoat peoples, Scattercoat First Nations, and the Yawanawa of Brazil to lift up our Indigenous traditional knowledge, because COVID-19 has shown us another important thing: food sovereignty, food security, and food independence is something else we need to look at. And that could be from the inner city, from community gardens to widespread agroecology projects. So that's what we're trying to do with each other, lift up those type of projects, help take back the land, start growing things again, start making sure that we're connected once again. So those treaties, those nation-to-nation treaties are important. And I hope that we can continue that across peoples. It's not just about Indigenous peoples, but it's all peoples. All other peoples are on lands that are occupying lands that are traditionally the lands of Indigenous peoples, and they have to come to terms with that, which is why people are doing land acknowledgements and things of that nature. But I think that that's coming together in that way to really produce something and give back is one of the ways to go. And I thank you for that time.
Thank you so much. That was nice, short and sweet. Yeah, thank you. So this next question is going to be from you, Yorta. Because I know you're all the way in Australia, and it's very similar to the question that was asked earlier. How is it, you being there, being on the ground, fighting for your people? How are you finding ways to navigate and get your voice heard? Just like my cousin Lance was saying, we have to be able to get our voices heard. So how are you? What success are you finding in that you could give to people that are tuning in?
Yeah, that's definitely there's commonality in so many of the things that everybody else has spoken to so far, and particularly in relation to the this blanket of COVID, which has been thrown over communication channels for everybody at the moment. And you could really see that coming over here in terms of the way many things were rolling out, in terms of the restriction of human movement that's going on with COVID right now. We had legislation moves that were being put in place late last year, in fact, to restrict the movement of people, restrict the gathering of people to stand up against the oppressive forces that be. So there's so many cards that were already lined up leading into where we are now. And at the best of times, anything that's resistant to the state, anything that's about the sovereignty of First Nations people, it is not given any platform whatsoever within mainstream media sources and so on. So we do have our First Nations media here. It's a government-funded medium of media. So even the languaging that they're able to use, it's quite restrictive and constrained to certain channels. So the biggest thing that we've been able to do is build up that communication amongst one another. And certainly social media has been a really powerful tool for our people, first and foremost, to make sure that we're connected to one another. Obviously, COVID has just put, those connections of our people into disarray, where as First Nations people, our need to sit around and be with one another, to talk, to be on the sacred lands that are ours is so crucial. So, that was devastating for us, and it's still devastating at the moment. So for us, definitely, we have to use the digital platform in terms of from a grassroots basis to get our messages out. And although, we don't necessarily have access to the full spectrum of the mainstream media, tapping into other First Nations media streams and media channels and conglomerations, as far as, I see it, that's the most powerful thing that we can continue to do, and continue to, trickle, different pathways of that movement into broader platforms for us to all connect into. So really that's what we're doing at the moment. And certainly our people's spirit will not be crushed, as has been mentioned throughout this conversation already, especially with Auntie at the beginning there. Genocide started in 1788 on this land, and it's still going right to this day. It's just got a different face, it's got a different name, and they advantageously use the tactics of the moment in time. Always, just as with Donald Trump, as it was mentioned, use those tactics and those opportunities in that moment in time to advance their cause. So, we're here, we're still surviving, we're still strong, we're still resilient, and we will always find a silver lining to remain strong in the times. So, yeah, really privileged to, come and connect in this moment in time. And I acknowledge that, across different parts of the world, sister from Brazil, and my heart goes out to you and everybody in Turtle Island. It's really horrific. I've been watching what's going on with the Mashpee people, the news coming across about the Navajo Nation, and of course the Wet'suwet'en people further north and across all of Turtle Island. It's obviously devastating. So, getting those grassroots channels of information has been important as well for us back to here, so that we can inform one another and understand, what we can do to give action to what everybody's doing.
Well, thank you. That was pretty uplifting, because we are resilient.
Most definitely.
Yes, this next question is actually going to be for you, Sarah Eagleheart. And a lot of the work that you do within philanthropy, I mean, you work so hard and you're very successful at it, and one of the things in our communities is funding. That's always been like a hard thing, and so what kind of advice or, success stories could you share that, people that are listening that are actually just really, trying to work really hard to even raise, $1,000 for a funeral or things like that? What kind of advice could you give us in your work?
I think that's a tough question. I think a lot of us that work with philanthropy or work around the nonprofit, philanthropic structures know that we have to play a different game. I know there's a lot of us that do a lot of activism as well as leading nonprofits, and we have to walk a really fine line in all of that. I think for me personally, because I grew up in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and because, I grew up very humbly and modestly raised by my grandma and my extended family, I have really always felt and just had a drive to see impact and change in my community. And so because I've had that drive to see change, I've had to figure out the systems, right? I've had to figure out like a way to partner with people that, you know, people wouldn't normally think to partner with them, or they wouldn't, you know, think. So just thinking outside the box is really, really important. I also think it is who you know. I think that, you know, keeping in relationship with everybody in your network. I mean, I know so many people on this call because of the various networks that I've been a part of. And so I'm just really grateful and keeping up those relationships. Personally, I think one of my, you know, most amazing partnerships that led to the greatest amplification that I've ever been a part of is my partnership with John Legend and Baobab Studios for Crow the Legend, which was a virtual reality 2D animated story about how the crow became Black. And so this story also had people like Oprah, Liza Koshy, John Legend, I mean, Constance Wu. And so before Crazy Rich Asians, right? So it was an allyship with Baobab Studios, who, you know, they wanted to do it right. They wanted to make sure that Indigenous people were a part of the story. So I was there. Randy Edmonds, who's Kiowa Caddo, played the narrator. I played the moon, but I also got to play a cultural advisor on the project. And I didn't even know what VR was before they came to me with this project, right? But I said yes. I was like, okay, let me do this. And we ended up winning 4 out of 5 Emmys that we were nominated for last year. And this project, not only, you know, do I have an Emmy behind me, like I also, you know, am able to like share that story with like young people who, you know, grew up on the res that never thought that we could win an Emmy, right? And I think like that's really important. And I had to try hard and think outside the box and make it happen. Baobab Studios actually came around and wanted to help with COVID and raising money for our Native COVID Action Fund. And so they have a sing-along video right now that I didn't even know this was a thing, but I think people with little girls probably know this, that I have boys and they're big now, but I mean, little girls apparently sing along with animated videos. And so there's a song out there from John Legend, from Crow the Legend, that's out there to raise awareness. So that's really exciting. I think with Return to the Heart Foundation, you know, I co-founded this organization with other Indigenous women like Red Dawn Foster, who's a state senator in South Dakota. And we did it because we wanted to see a change. And we saw that, you know, there are a lot of Indigenous women leading on the front lines. Literally in COVID, every single woman that we partnered with that was leading a tribal healthcare network was a woman. I guess it's no, you know, mistake that we're always there. But at the same time, we haven't had any funding or resources focused on the women that are doing this work, most of the time for free, right? And so we wanted to find a way to really connect civic engagement, climate justice, narrative change, and also restorative and regenerative development for our Indigenous women-led communities. So that's really important to us because we see a synergy between all 4 of those areas. And so just to like wrap it up, and so I don't want to go on, but I jumped into this because, you know, I grew up with this idea from my people that it was ingrained in my head that was like, help your people. You have to, and I don't know, I don't think my grandma ever told it to me or whatever, but it's just like what you had to do every single day in the way that you live your life. You know, you had to show respect and generosity and gratitude, and you had the creator in your life every day, and you're praying and you're saying, Badakuya Oyase, you know, we're all related. And because of this upbringing and this community, it really taught me that I had to step up where I can. And I think that's where we're all right now, because, you know, there are some of us that we're able to focus in certain areas. You know, Yonaza is great with her, you know, Indigenous peoples movement activism and artivism. And, you know, we have all these really great people that are all over the world doing policy, right? Like, I mean, that's not my thing, but I love people that do that, right? And so I'm just really grateful for everyone stepping up where they can and how they can, but also I think, you know, showing love and kindness and compassion to one another and to yourselves in this moment, because it's a really tough moment, but we have to find a way to work together. And I think, you know, Dr. Yearwood is right. The other side is organizing against our community. And so, you know, many of us, I know we're scared, but we have to find a way to continue to organize that can help serve our communities and actually find a way out of this that's better. This is the time to change systems. I know we're a little bit worried right now, but this is the moment where we can actually change up a lot of these systems because they're in chaos. So it's just as much an opportunity for us too, and we have to be thinking that way as well. Finally, you know, for us, I guess our ask is at Return to the Heart Foundation is really, you know, number one, you can help us get personal protective equipment to the regional tribal networks that we're working with. Great Plains Tribal Chairman's Health Board, Michigan Tribes Indigenous Mutual Aid, New Mexico Native American Relief Fund, Northern Tribes, Yurok and Hupa tribes, as well as the Mana Healers Hui in Hawaii. By supporting us, and go to returntotheheart.org so you can fund, you can amplify, which is really, really important because communication and visibility means money. You can partner with us on projects that we have out there. And I also think it's important that we take that time to tell our stories right now and find a way forward. So thank you for having me on here. Madakuye Oyase, I really appreciate you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So everybody just came in, but we still have Natani from, so just like what she was just saying, you know, being able to, you know, be creative with it and things like that. We know that you are an amazing artist. So can you just share with us, like, in what ways, like, you have, you know, you might be able to encourage people to use their artistry in this. And as Indigenous peoples, you know, we're artists. That's what they call us, artists, but there's just also our life ways. You know, that's our way of living. It's not necessarily who we, you know, what we do, it's who we are as artists. And you've been able to be pretty successful in that. And also, can you just share with us, you know, how you're able to utilize that in this time, you know, your artistry to help?
Yeah, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can.
My sound is all messed up in the beginning, but Hamitaka Bichante Washtainape Chuzapalo. My name is Natani Means. I'm Dene Oglala Lakota in Umaha. My mother, her name's Glory Grant. My father's name is Russell Means. I'm an artist, like she said, and I think one of the ways, I mean, I'm also a co-founder of this collective called Obsidian Collective, and it's a frontline company, brand, whatever you want to call it, that is bringing awareness to resource extraction. Specifically, we released a line of clothing back in October with in a collaboration with the LA-based company called The Hundreds, and it gained a lot of attention. You know, it was totally frontline tactical wear with a streetwear style to it, and I brought in 5 different native clothing brands to work together and be a sort of powerhouse to make it happen. A lot of what Obsidian is doing, what I do for the past couple years before Standing Rock, you know, around Oak Flat, before Oak Flat, is that we do go to these campaigns, and what I'm able to do is be able to lend my, I don't know if you call it expertise or whatever, just my help to frontline occupations, or you know, when it comes to putting your body on the line. A couple years ago, after Standing Rock was the Line 3 in Minnesota, Enbridge Line 3, and I spent almost about a year out there, maybe about 8 months from the summer into the end of winter. And so far that project was set to be finished, you know, last year, and it's been delayed 2 more years due to the work that the Ojibwe people and a lot of the surrounding allies are contributing to that campaign, you know, delaying the project, making it happen, you know, putting their freedom at risk, and a lot of people have been arrested. And that's what we're gearing up to combat right now with the Keystone XL. There are people out in Montana right now, northeast Montana, near the Fort Peck, in between Fort Peck and Fort Belknap Indian reservations in northern Montana, that are creating man camp response teams and a couple of good friends of mine are out there, and they are risking a lot of their own well-being right now. You know, they're being followed by security companies, by state troopers. My friend was just posting about it the other night that he's directly working with the women and the elders in Fort Peck Indian Reservation to create these man camp response teams to combat, you know, what's going to happen with the Keystone XL. There's still construction going on around the border, Canadian-U.S. border, even though a federal judge, granted the, I think it was, he disapproved their permits to cross under over 200 waterways, and that was based off of Endangered Species Act, not off of a Freshwater Act. So the Keystone XL is delayed on that end, but they're able to do construction in areas where they do not cross underneath waterways, and they're pursuing that in Montana. And right now, people are out there risking, and this is one of the lowest areas where COVID has appeared. So they're doing what they can. I'll be joining them soon. You know, I'm here with my family, taking care of what we need to take care of here. My mother, she's Dene. I grew up on the Navajo Nation, and a lot of my family is being affected right now in Chinle, Arizona, by what's happening with COVID-19. Over 2,300 cases have appeared on the Navajo Nation. I get emotional talking about it because our people are so at risk. And there's been over 73 COVID-related deaths on my nation, my mother's people, family that I know, family that are connected to us. And it's very eye-opening, and it's very hard to realize that your people are suffering at the hands of a disease that was brought here yet again, that goes back to the smallpox epidemics and the whooping coughs and the measles. Something as simple as the flu killed us a long time ago. And this is like my auntie said, I'd like to acknowledge my twin Madonna Thunderhawk, who was speaking here earlier. She's my auntie. Her and my father are sister and brother. And like she said, this is nothing new for us. It's just another year of something. And this is very good what the Indigenous Peoples Movement is happening, because just today I was starting to feel overwhelmed and useless almost, you know, purposeless, because I'm usually able to travel. I'm usually able to be right out there. And this virus has crippled a lot of us in some sort of way. And it's hard being from separate different nations because you don't know which way to go. And having this happen and hearing everybody's words from around the world has, you know, re-energized me, because as whatever you want to label yourself, activist, freedom fighter, woke, you know, you get burnt out, and it's important to self-care and to remember to love yourself and respect yourself in these times and not overwork. But I'm very thankful to this community, to this movement. You know, I was born into it. I'm gonna pass on into it, and I'm gonna leave a legacy for my people to follow. I just ask everybody that they take care of themselves, and remember to take care of your families first, and then the people, you know, and then that way we can create the cycle. You know, that's real revolution. Revolution is a circle. Everything we do is sacred, is in a circle. So that's what real revolution is: coming back to the center, coming back to the beginning. And I think the earth is proving to us that she knows revolution, that she don't need us, and it's us that need her. And it's our job as Indigenous people to remind everybody that to remind everybody that we are nothing, but we are everything at the same time. So thank you to everybody on here. Lilo Wopila, Chichelo, Hachatu. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
What
you.
a beautiful way to just close out this first panel. And I'm seeing, I just want to just say and take this time because everyone is now in here. And we at Indigenous Peoples Movement, when we are a coalition-based organization, and the goal, there is no directors, co-founders, there's none of that with Indigenous Peoples Movement because we all have to come together. And with this, with this town hall, this global town hall of this magnitude is something first that I've seen since this pandemic. And we have our brother from Australia, our sister from the Amazon, our Chicana sister from LA. We got the, representing the Taino people, Canada, Dene, Omaha, Ocheti Shakoi, my tribe, my nation. We have people, even our other nation, the Black nation, from Africa and even here. And it's beautiful that we are able to use the internet and these platforms so we can be able for all of you all to share exactly what's happening, boots on the ground. You all are in these communities. All of us that are viewing have been watching the news. But everyone is getting it here first. So I want to thank you. And before we go into our next, we're going to start off our next panel with my spiritual brother, Keith IMC, to open us up and even close out the first panel with our traditional prayer song. And I also, really quick, I'm going to shout out your name. You can say your, well, you know what we'll do? For those that are tuning in, we'll make sure that we get everyone's information that we can promote because once again, we're a hub. So we're going to promote all of you all's organizations, your fights, your call to actions. So make sure you let us know what you want us to put out, on our social media platforms and our newsletters and everything. So let us know that. And you're more than welcome to stick around in the Zoom because it's about to get really interesting. I just see my brother Immortal Technique. I see my brother Angelo. We got Sister Tanya, Dr. Larry Fisher, Latoya, all the way from Australia again. We have Dan Loudfoot, so Riza Islam. So we have a lot of great people on here so thank you so much for everyone that tuned in. If you're going to stick around, or you could go ahead and log off. And thank you. All right, Keith, the mic is to you.
All right. It's good to be here again. Just want to say Noah Hinkshte to all the relatives here on and all the words that were shared in the first panel was a lot of good information and spiritual knowledge from everybody doing their positive work all over the country, and I look at it and I know, and what I was told is that in this time, because this is prophesied time, this was prophesied, this is seen, foreseen. So they said that because these things are coming to pass, they say that if you operate out of your spiritual gift and you utilize that gift to bring a positive spiritual energy, that you play a part in the balance that is needed in this world. And that is very important. And one of the things that they say is that in these times, they say we have to pray fast and we have to organize fast because we are in a time of battle. And like a warrior, they say, who is quick in a time of battle, you pray quick because you have to protect quick. And so in these times, they say you act fast, but you use your logic, but you follow your spirit, because your spirit will guide you. And how you understand that is through your life experience, through your own personal journey, what you've been through, the hardships, the love and the compassion that carried you through to be here in this time, to operate out of this gift, to use your words to maneuver through this technology, through the light beam, through this technology, to hit the algorithms, to tie that positive spiritual energy to the data that is going into the air is very important right now, because this virus, this sickness is not only a COVID-19, it's a sickness within the minds of the people, because in this prophesied time, they say we are in a battle of your mind, a battle of your post, a battle of your energy, battle of your thoughts, and a battle of who you align with. This technology is being used by the enemy to divide us. That's why we have to think spiritually and logically to keep these circles positive, with compassion, love, forgiveness, so that we can move forward in a beautiful way. They say if you can move forward in a beautiful way, that's spiritual energy. And if you move in that spiritual energy, you understand the concept of how we were created in the star nation, through the morning star and the evening star, the male and female energy, and the unity of a family, and the importance of a village. We are trying to go back to a village, and what destroyed our villages is the smallpox, is cholera, is measles, is these biological weapons that were created and designed to try to destroy us and wipe us off the face of the earth. But because our ancestors understand this, they say that they are here to help us and guide us and give us spiritual knowledge through your dreams and your visions. So this prayer song that I want to start with, it's Chihoto Sagris, which means keep on striving. Are you tired? If you're tired, know that you can continue forward in your life, because one day you will be in the higher realm, in the hallway, the heavens, in the spiritual place. So what you do now in this world that is temporary is very spiritually important. And it's about putting that spiritual positive energy into your phone, and let your network, your people feel that and hear it, because it's so crucial. Shihoto Sagaris, Chino Otho, Darius Momes Come, Awach Kinapiyak, this Howen. So I wanted to share that before I start and acknowledge all of my relatives that I've crossed paths with on this spiritual journey. Honored to be here in this circle with y'all through this technology. And I pray that you stay healthy. I pray your family stay healthy. I pray that you maneuver and you balance your spiritual, your mental, and your physical energy. Get physically fit, spiritually fit, emotionally fit. And if you're struggling and you can't sleep and you have anxiety, jump in a sweat lodge. Find a sweat lodge. It works. It will heal and help our people at this time. My name is Keith IMC. I'm a Skiri and Chawi Pawnee, Wolf Band of the Pawnee, and I'm also Seminole, Nogazogi, which is Bear Clan of the Seminole. Those are my people. In words of my father, who recently made a spiritual journey to the heavens, who always helped me and encouraged me, he would always say, as I would leave the house, he would say, son, make a friend. And so that's what we need to do. Come back to that friendship, align with each other. Let's forgive each other. Let's love each other, and let's strive to push forward. So blessings to y'all as I sing this song. Thank you, relatives. Thank you, Sister Yunajaha, for allowing me to be here today. Blessings to y'all. Maro. Chiho Shakadis Shina Akadis Momes Come Awachkin Api Yakatis Halwen Miko Shabag Apiyanam Ayetan Chia Chiko Momes Come Awachkin Api Akati Alwen Shihon Shakatis China Akatis Momesh Home Hawachin Wapi Yakatis Alwen Noah, Dudahi, Dada Chicks, anyway, Dudahi, may you be blessed and may your words be aligned and allow that spirit to move through you. Encourage your community, watch over your families, keep each other safe, and continue to keep striving forward. And let's have a beautiful future. We've come too far to stop here. Let's keep continuing on in a good way, in a spiritual way. Thank you all. I just want to say it's a beautiful day. At this, Dirawa Ofunga Hizar, Gedimizi, Maro, Tata Chixto, anyway, Dirahe Sakukire, Tiku Skitui, Magazi, Kachahuki Jaho, Jifkaros, the hope, Maro.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, Keith.
We needed that, Keith. So many people around the world that's watching needed that. Okay, yeah. That aligned us back up.
Yeah, you did.
That got us back centered again.
Yeah, it's been a tough week, I'm sure. I mean, it's been a tough time just since we've been in this, but there's just been something about this week, has just been very, very hard for each and every one of us. And you guys are leaders. So, we thank you for coming and taking your time to really get your voices heard to the world and get our voices to echo our voices as leaders to the world during this time. So the way we want to do this is that we have some questions that we will ask towards, individuals, but then we do have some general questions. And we want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time in case you want to be able to kind of comment or have a small dialogue with someone else, that might be, touching on the points that you're working on. My first question, I want to actually just acknowledge my relative, Dan Laufoot, because at the start of the entire thing, it was literally the beginning of powwow season. And powwows were canceling left and right. And we know as Indigenous peoples that gathering is very important for us. I mean, in the Northeast, we've been having powwows recorded for close to 400 years, recorded. And you coming from our communities, Mashantucket, Pequot, you are one of the founders of social distancing powwow. That, if you want to tell us a little bit about, what inspired you to do that, at that time and so fast. I mean, that literally gave us the healing that we needed immediately. Just like, Keith was talking about, fast. We have to pray fast. We have to act fast. And you did exactly that for all of us, virtually. And I just want to honor you and say thank you, Katapatanamish, for doing that for us, because people didn't know how they were going to make it. You have people that literally bank on powwows for their economical income. And with powwows being canceled, people were devastated. And so you stepped up for all of our people for healing. And I just want to, ask you, what inspired you to do that and what impacts have you seen?
Yeah, for me, so my name is Dan Simons. I come from the, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm from the Pequot tribe, born and raised in Connecticut. I don't want to talk much right now because I'd rather have the women speak and the elders talk before me, so I can wrap up at the end. And as well as Indigenous people, I feel like women are definitely silenced even more, and as if not much as Indigenous people. So I'll just go at the end, and I don't want to talk right now. But yeah, I'm glad to be here, and thank you all for being here, and I'll wait to speak. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, yes, that's right. No, that's beautiful. We keeping everything tradish. I love it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Then I'll, this question, well, actually, Alicia, if you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you've been doing, and any kind of call to actions that we on this call and everyone that's listening worldwide can take action for.
Well, I am from the Navajo Nation. My background is a mixture of, I've lived off the Navajo Nation on and off. I'm from a small community out in Badaway. That's where my Martin family is from. And they're kind of forgotten with a lot of the, because they're way at the edge and they're so small. It's a remote area. A lot of the people out there, especially just way out near the Grand Canyon, there was no development for the last like over 50 years out there. There's the Bennett Freeze. So they have no running water, they have no electricity. It's a place where my family grew up. We had family reunions out there, we camped out there. So when this started, I knew immediately what they needed. And the chapter houses, they haven't been that effective with being there for their community. So I didn't want to jump into anything that already had a lot of issues. So I just started a small GoFundMe for that area. So I knew the chapters and the Navajo Nation were going to do, and they have done some things. So my idea was to grab those who fell through the cracks. So we've done just small distributing out there for like 30 people. I've gone out there with the grazing official who knows where the people are in remote location, who knows where the elderly are. So I've gone with him to find those people. And when this first started, what was hard was going out there with my parents. And then a lot of those people don't realize how worried or scared they were until you give them food or money to go get hot water. A lot of them depend on the government food that they have to go pick up. So when we hand the stuff over, you see this sense of relief and they get slightly emotional because that's kind of like they didn't realize how worried they were about themselves. And then to hear like 6 weeks ago how we were the first people out there to help them was very concerning for me and my family. But some of the, there's a lot of people that have gotten sick, which kind of shut down some of our groups, our volunteers. So that was tough. That some of the people that were helping to get things together, which is why for me and my group, it made it harder to distribute sooner. So I was only able to, it was a month and then took 4 weeks to get more things out there. So thankfully within that time, the Navajo Nation has gone together with more food, distribution sites, and the chapter are starting to do that now. But it took almost a month for them to, especially chapters, to be active. When this first started, the chapters were closed. They shut them down. So the officials, they didn't have any emergency plan or any way to help the people in their area. So people called them, they were unavailable for the first few weeks of the virus. And that's what has caused the spread to be really worse for the Navajo Nation. And then on top of that, the lack of water, the lack of grocery stores. I live in a border town, so I know how, I have family an hour away that has to drive here just to go shop at Walmart. So I knew that if there was a case here, from an hour away, you can imagine all those people have to come here to shop, or Farmington or Gallup, they have to travel to the border town and they're just taking it all back. And then due to the housing situation, there are multiple generations living in one house. And that's tough because I have a family member that is a first responder. So, you know, she lives with other family members, and she was trying to find someplace else to stay, but it was too late. She got the virus, and with that spread to the family that, you know, she was living with. So, sorry. So that was tough for the family. Yeah, I'm trying to move on. I think the one thing that's hidden here, like we know all the issues on the Navajo Nation, and we've known how long they haven't been addressed. But right now, I think a lot of people are carrying a lot of grief. So my focus now has been, how are we going to help them cope and heal in a lot more healthy ways than the trauma that has been done to Indigenous people, you know, for centuries. So that's where my focus is. My GoFundMe for the, you know, Broadway Gap surrounding areas, I am not trying to make it, you know, really large. I just want to find the people through the cracks, and I want the focus to be more on what we need to change with the Navajo government and the chapter houses. That's kind of where I'm at, I guess. And I live in a border town, so I'm also, you know, trying to bridge the gap between the town and the Navajo Nation. There is, you know, people always blame the Navajos. There was someone that got arrested, a Page citizen that got arrested for making threats towards Navajos, saying that we were bringing the virus into town. So there's been a lot of that. So I think my mission is to like work small, reach out to, it doesn't matter the race in this community, but to unite with each other to just change the, I'm trying to think of the word, you know, just what's been going on in this town. I think it's been ignored, the fact that, you know, now there are a lot of Navajos in this town, and that's I guess ignored for a while.
All right.
So now just trying to work together and unite people. So
thank you so
and
much, Alicia.
Yeah.
What's happening at the Navajo Nation is so, for those that's tuning in right now, I mean, I know if you have not heard about what's happening in the Navajo Nation in the Southwest region of America, it's horrible. And we just heard Natani and Tahir, Alicia, and but COVID is also affecting so many other Indigenous communities. I want us to transition this to our freedom fighter sister, Kanahus Manuel. She is live right now at the camp, at Tiny Warriors Camp on the front line. And it was funny when I reached out to her. I said, "Sis, can you get on this on this virtual town hall?" She said, "Well, I'm at camp. If I'm fighting, if I don't get arrested, then I'll be there." So I'm so happy that you're here. Can you briefly let everyone know who you are and where you're at, and also how, you know, we're hearing on the news that they are still building oil pipelines, they have man camps happening in the midst of this pandemic. Real briefly, can you let us know what's happening in your nation, in your community?
White Kukwai Tip, thank you for letting me have this opportunity to be here with you all. I'm right now live from the front lines here at our blockade. This area right here is proposed plan for 1,000-man man camp. They want 1,000 men to live right here permanently while they build the pipeline. These man camps are linked to increased violence against Indigenous women in these northern communities. I'm a freedom fighter. I'm a mother of 4. I'm an Indigenous birth worker and a tattoo artist. So I do all of that here on the front lines. And right now we're located, we have tiny houses, and that's how we're fighting. We have tiny houses on wheels, and we have 6 of them. 5 of them are here in Blue River. Blue River is located around halfway in between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Edmonton. Edmonton is the hub for the oil industry coming from the Alberta tar sands. The Alberta tar sands, if you don't know, is one of the biggest climate carbon bombs in the world. It's actually the largest industrial project known to mankind, and it's around 4 hours drive from where I am right now. And this is where they want to pipe all this dirty crude, bitumen, heavy crude oil all the way from the Alberta tar sands, Edmonton terminal, en route to the coast, Vancouver, BC. And so they propose to go through here, 500 kilometers of our territory. And we've been here since July 2018, blockading this man camp, which would be the first initial phase of this project, which would be to house the pipeline workers coming in to build this project. This pipeline wants to be, or like the completed project would be 1,152 kilometers of pipeline. And we're here, we've been attacked many times, not just by the police targeting us, Indigenous land defenders, as criminals. You know, they charge us with criminal charges for standing in defense of our lands. We are in a very rare, unique situation here in BC in that we've never signed treaties. We have never signed any treaties with the colonial government, not with Great Britain, Canada, nor British Columbia. So our land is unceded, unsurrendered, and we've been facing off with Canada, and the Indian wars are not over here in the north, and we continue to be targeted. On May 5th was the National Awareness Day for the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. There is a federal inquiry into the large numbers of murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada, and in the final report admits that there is a race-based genocide against Indigenous women and girls in this country. And we see it firsthand. We had 3 redneck races come to our front gate on October 19th and came to threaten violence, actually came with their fists, with some commanders, busted through our barricade, stole my truck, rammed it into one of our houses, and there was nothing done about it. On social media, their faces went all over, but they've never been picked up, or the police aren't even actively investigating these white supremacists that come here. It's like modern day lynching. They came here to destroy us, to cause harm, and they know that we are a group of women mainly here at our encampment and at our village here. So we're standing strong. They're not going to strong arm us out of our land, and we're going to stay here. And we want to stand in solidarity with everybody around the world, everyone here in this town hall. Reach out to me, try to find us, Tiny House Warriors. My name is Kanahus Manuel again. It means red woman. We're here in the Northwest. We're not stopping. Nothing is going to stop us from continuing to fight for our land here.
Thank you. So I want to actually say thank you for being out there. I remember when Antani left, I actually camped at the Ahontuan and the Chewichosh, the merged camps at Standing Rock. And I was there, just like my cousin Lance said, to travel out there because of the knowledge that, we carry in the East. Like, it starts in the East. We were hit first. And with the knowledge that we preserved as far as preservation and how to live off the land, that's what I wanted to come and give to the people. So I helped to build not necessarily tiny houses, but homes that were secure enough for people to live underneath the harsh elements, and to feel okay and feel like it's home and not just like a tent that you're living in, because that's a space that you have to come back to. So I want to thank you for holding that ground down. I know what that feels like. I remember I wanted tattoos from you. I have my hand poke tattoos here. So maybe
I want a tattoo.
I remember that, but we couldn't get the timing right because it was either front lines and stuff. So I just want to say thank you, because I know what that's like. Listening to what you're saying is triggering a little bit for me. It's a little hard. And I'm going to be open to say that, listening and watching all this stuff is very hard to hear every day, because I lived it. We still live it, unfortunately. So I want to actually, this next question And first, I want to have you introduce yourself, Tanya. I know you have you're there in the Midwest, the North Midwest, and you work within our urban communities. And one of the things that's happening, and you can tell us about what you're doing, but I do like you to kind of address a situation that's hard for us as minority people, as people of color, is unheard messages because of the things that we've been through. We've heard all the we've heard all the things that have happened. We see what's going on, but we tend to ignore it sometimes. And that's why we see the numbers increase sometimes, whether it's through healthcare, health disparities. So with the work that you're doing around health in these urban communities, how are you navigating through that and getting these messages actually heard?
Yeah, the education piece has been the hardest piece by far to get out to our people. The way that the media is updating folks on COVID is really not trickling down to our communities here, specifically in Chicago, where I'm at. I founded an organization called Healthy Hood Chicago, and we were created to combat a 20-year life expectancy gap that exists in Chicago between communities of color and affluent communities. It's actually the largest life expectancy gap in all of the nation. It's even more than New York, where there's more people, and more than Detroit, where more people are living under the poverty line. And that's because in Chicago, we're very, very segregated here in our community. So it's very kind of blunt and in your face to see where resources are being distributed and where they're not being distributed, And so we've been working on dealing with healthcare disparities, and as we all know, you got to teach your people first why these disparities exist, in the hopes that maybe they get a little angry and we can organize so that we can do something to change that reality. And so we had already kind of been starting that work before COVID hit. And so now we have shifted all of our programming to digital platforms in terms of teaching people how to be healthier. I think a lot of times our people are told all the time what our circumstances are, and we know our circumstances. We know them better than anyone because there are circumstances. And the problem is that nobody's telling us how to deal with our circumstances specifically to beat this. Our people are essential workers. They're going out to work every day because they're the nurses, specifically immigrants, which we call the diaspora at our organization. The immigrants here are the ones that are taking care of the old people in the old folks' homes. They're the nurses, they're the daycare, they're the nannies. They're the ones being told to come clean houses and disinfect. And we're starting to see 70% of the death toll here in Chicago is Black and brown. So it's our people that are dying, and everyone's saying social distance. Our people don't have that opportunity. No, and our people don't have the option to shelter in place either. And a lot of people, even if they are sheltering in place, like I said, they have 12 people living in a 2-bedroom house, and they got 2 essential workers, like the sister was saying, that are going out and getting exposed and bringing it back to their house. So what we've really been focusing on is, number one, getting our people some essential groceries and PPE, because they don't have the same options as some of these more privileged people do in this city. But then also educating them. I think in the last town hall, the first one that went, what was said was, this is an opportune time to get organized and to mobilize our people and to unite our people. It's no time to play the oppression Olympics right now. We got to just band together right now and figure out what resources we have amongst each other, and then communicate with each other where those resources are needed most to get them out, instead of just, hustling for scraps and forgetting why we're in this situation in the first place. And then lastly, like I said, educating our people. Listen, COVID is not killing our community right now. Inequality is. It's because we have these underlying issues and health issues that we're more vulnerable to dying from this virus. And the reason we have those health issues is because of these broken systems that are in place. They make it so we can't get fresh food. They make it so we can't get the proper healthcare that we need, or we can't afford to be healthy because it's too expensive, you know, to go to a gym class or something. So we're trying to educate our people in the meantime. The way that we've done it is we've created a hotline that is zip code specific. So when people call, we know how to direct them in their own neighborhood, because we know some people have transportation issues because we're poor. And then the other thing we're doing is we're delivering, no contact delivering to people's homes, these essential groceries and PPE. We've already gathered about 250 volunteers to do this work. And we're opening up another 2 sites. We have one running right now for distribution. But now every time we are delivering these care kits, what we're including in these care kits is literature and a to-do list. Because now that this person is a recipient of our care kit and is now educated on these safety tips, they have to do their part to pay it forward to the rest of the people that live on their block. So we're trying to make our recipients now block leaders to find out what the needs are, you know, amongst their people, so we can get a real gauge of what the problem is in our communities. Because we're not getting tested. We don't have access to testing. They're saying that it's free, and then we're going to these places and it's not free. And they're asking us for social security numbers and insurance. Why? You know, this is a pandemic here. This is a human issue. It shouldn't matter if you're a citizen of this country or not. People are getting sick and dying and spreading this virus all over the place. So we've really just been trying to find a way to like really create a movement in the midst of all of this, instead of just doing what a lot of people are doing right now, which is direct services, which we understand is necessary. But again, the problem with that is that we're all hustling for scraps, and we don't have the time nor the energy to do the advocacy. And if we don't do the advocacy, we're going to go back to normal. And for us, normal wasn't good. We need a new normal. And what we're demanding now is a seat at the table in constructing that new normal so that we're included.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And she's also the daughter of the great Emma Lozano, who does amazing work in Chicago, who I've been on the front line with. And so you know, this just goes to show that when you see injustice or you see something happening, that you're like, you know what, I can't wait on my local government to give me a handout or to help. I'm going to go ahead, and the power of the people don't stop. I want to transition that to our sister Latoya in Australia. And, you know, you have been really pushing and advocating for Aboriginal people, as you are an Aboriginal sister. You've been advocating for your brother. You've been advocating for those that have been in prison and the brutality that happens for the land. I mean, so you being all the way in Australia, how are you able in this time right now? Well, first off, let everyone know what is going on in Australia, first question, in COVID amongst Aboriginal people. They already been taking the lands of Aboriginal people. There was a huge fire that happened. And then second question, very briefly, because we are short on time, but very briefly, in this time, what have you been advocating for, and what's the call to action on how we can help you all there in Australia, because you've been traveling to the Americas, all over the world, but what call to action during this time that we can help you all there?
Kia ora. Thank you for having me, first of all. What a beautiful time to be around everybody, and what beautiful songs as well. That's just uplifted my morning. I was called at 4 a.m. to wake up and pray and be in meditation this morning, I think, for today. And that, yeah, it's really centered me again. So thank you. So yeah, I'm Latoya. My family, so I'm Aboriginal and Māori. My dad's Ngāti Porou from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and my mum's Aboriginal. We descend from Wiradjuri, but I've grown up on Kaurna land, which is where I'm coming from today. And my brother, Wayne Fella Morrison, died in custody, or rather was killed by over 14 corrections officers who used their body weight to restrain him, put a spit hood over him, and he suffocated and 2 days later he passed away. So I work on issues of Aboriginal deaths in custody, which I'm doing at the moment here on Kaurna land in Australia. We've created a group called #CleanOutPrisons. Now I know that's another group that's going on around the world, and particularly in Canada. As Sister Nikki was saying, we have very similar cases. So we've had 97 deaths here in Australia so far, and tens of thousands of people have been tested. But as another sister, Tanya, was saying, we're showing up to get tested, being told that tests are available for us. And when we're getting there, we're not receiving them. So again, the media is lying to communities, making people come outside of their homes, if they have homes to actually isolate in, going all the way to places like hospitals and health centres and not actually getting the tests that they need. This morning, our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, or rather so-called Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, not my Prime Minister, I won't claim him, he said, you can stay under the doona, the blanket, forever, and you'll never face any danger. But we've got to get out from under the doona at some time. Now, what does that say to me about the way the Australian government is seeing us in our homes? Aboriginal people are literally used to being forced inside, but also over-surveilled in our homes. So the fact that there's supposedly safety in our homes, that's just not true at the moment for a lot of people. My own brother last week was actually evicted from his home. So at the moment, he has no way to actually stay in isolation from any place alongside so many homeless people across Australia. But with prisons particularly, and obviously the over-policing that's happening now because people are out on the street exposed to police and corruption and white supremacy, our group Clean Out Prisons have been lobbying the government. And so, yeah, if people want to go to #CleanOutPrisons and look at some of the letters on behalf of our family. So our group is made up mostly of families who have also had loved ones die in prison and been killed by police brutality. Here in Australia, we have almost over 500 Aboriginal deaths in custody that have gone unaccounted for. Nobody's ever been convicted for any Aboriginal death in custody here in Australia. And my brother's case now is coming up to year 4, with our investigation continuing and corrections taking our case to the Supreme Court to try to say that the process is corrupt and they don't even have to show up to give evidence about why my brother died at the hands of over 14 corrections officers. So that's where we're at the moment. Part of our group, we've been literally hearing from people inside that they're not getting, and our family members who are still inside, that they're not getting things like access to soap, any hand sanitizer, that these things are deemed contraband, which is hilarious because, again, we're in a global pandemic, and that's one of the things that is killing COVID, is to simply wash our hands. But people in prisons do not have access to the same degree as those on the outside. And COVID, I guess, the prison walls have become obsolete in a way, right? And it's not going to wait for people who can't actually isolate and simply wash their hands. So one thing we've done is dropped off soap to the prison gates. We've got a bunch of people to go to the local prisons and try to literally give as communities, again, not wait for the government to do it, but for us to do it. They've rejected our donations, they've rejected our assistance, they've rejected any visitations and services to people in prisons. So people are literally just going without at the moment in that case. So now we've been sending the soap literally to ministers. We've been sending the soap literally to ministers to say, well, you have access to our people in prisons, you go deliver it yourselves. So hopefully they're doing some of that. But essentially, we want people out of prisons. People don't need to be in prisons right now anywhere in the world. We know, particularly, in Turtle Island in America, people have been released en masse in some places, but then in other places, there's been mass deaths. And so we're trying to avoid that and learn from what other governments and what other, particularly Indigenous people are doing around the world, like everybody on this chat and everybody that we're connected to, and just standing in solidarity with all of you and just saying, on our end, we're doing everything that we can for people who don't have a voice and don't have access to the essential needs. And just as a final point, people are being locked down for over 22 hours a day. That's the government's response to COVID in prisons. Yet we know that corrections officers are the ones are the only ones allowed in those prisons, and the only ones bringing it in and giving it to people in prisons. So they're not being tested, which is an issue. Again, against the law, it should be. And in the last 2 days, we've had 3 deaths in custody in 2 days. So, you know, this isn't getting better. But us as family members who have lost people, I think it's good that we're in a position of power to raise our voices, knowing that we've lost people in custody and have been killed, to advocate for our brothers and sisters who remain, and yeah, Aboriginal people in custody right now in Australia. So if everybody wants to jump over to clean out prisons, there's, I guess, kind of groups across the world doing this work. And yeah, all my respect to everybody doing this work already as well.
Okay, alrighty. Well, thank you so much. And it's just so good to have people just, you know, from all over being able to share, because sometimes just telling your story actually helps other people's Indigenous people's, you know, figure out something that they might not have been thinking about, you know, because we're in such a space that it's hard sometimes to think outside of the box, especially when you're dealing with people, you know, within your own family unit, within your own village that are, you know, affected by this. So you're not necessarily thinking in the way that you can. So it's really good to have, you know, people to be able to say what's happening so that we can actually say, you know what, we're not the only ones, you know, and then there's things that we can do to support. So since we're kind of talking a little bit about prisons, I actually wanted to pose a question to you, Angelo. You know, and thank you for being on the call. You know, you get a chance to just introduce yourself. But the question too, and we asked this on the other call, but it's pretty relevant in the work that you're doing. I mean, you're on the front lines, you're working around the clock, you know, and you're getting our voices heard. Not only just our voices on the outside, but those that are on the inside. You know, there's a lot of work that you're doing. And again, the narrative right now has been COVID. And if it's not about COVID, then it's not being heard or it's being pushed aside. And the injustices are still continuing. I mean, we're hearing that in everyone's story. So my question to you, you know, after you introduce yourself, is how is it that you're navigating through this and pushing towards success despite of?
Yeah. So my name is Angelo Pinto, co-founder of an organization called Until Freedom. I'm also a co-founder of an organization called Justice League NYC. I'm an attorney by trade, and we're doing, you know, a variety of so much work right now on the ground around COVID. But as you said, work that was happening previously to COVID. I think right now for us, and someone said it and it was so profound, that when you really look at what's happening with COVID, it's not COVID that's killing our people. It's all the inequalities that have been around for so long that COVID has just kind of exacerbated. And I think we try to really keep that at the forefront of our mind as we do the work. And, you know, most recently, before COVID kind of became a thing, we were in Mississippi responding to Parchman facility, Mississippi State Penitentiary, where there were over 20, some reports of over 40 deaths in a couple of months of individuals who were incarcerated in this facility. And we were trying to get the facility closed. And then, you know, folks in Mississippi, when we were down there, were saying, you know, this is nothing new. And folks were like, oh, nothing's going to change. It was worse last year. So you're really dealing with a system that is so like viscerally oppressive that even in the midst of some of the trauma, folks are like, oh, nothing's going to change. This is just business as usual. This is what always happens here. This is nothing new. And in New York City right now, we're seeing, and we knew this was going to happen. We said, you know, once you tell folks they can't go outside, you're going to see an uptick in police brutality. You're just going to see it. And someone mentioned it earlier. They were like, you know, we're people who gathering means something to. Right? In our communities, with our families, whether it's on the stoop, whether it's around a corner in the park, gathering and coming together means something for us. In many ways, it addresses the trauma we may be experiencing. It allows us to come together for a moment. So when you say people can't gather, that means something. It does something to us. And now not only are they saying you can't even gather, but in New York City, they're enforcing it with violence. And in other communities where folks are still gathering, and white communities where gathering is happening, they're handing out masks. And we're saying, how could a disparity like this persist? And what we're realizing, which is fascinating, is that they're actually engaging in practices that are going to exacerbate difficulties beyond Corona. So in New York City, for example, there were 40 arrests related to social distancing. 35 were Black folks, 4 were folks from the Latinx community, and 1 white person was arrested. And we know that there were folks who weren't social distancing across the city. And then they said they were going to be issuing summonses across the city, and they issued about 374 summons, $1,000 summonses for not social distancing. And we know that 304 Black folks got these summonses, right? So you're talking about, in a span of 2 weeks, 14 days, $300,000 that now folks are going to have to come up with as a result of, over policing around social distancing. So we're in the process now of really pushing back against what's happening, not only around the over policing in New York City, but now the deaths that we're seeing as a result of police violence in Indianapolis, in Kentucky, and then, kind of the uptick in white supremacist violences that's happening, of course, in Georgia and around the country. So in many ways, while we're experiencing a pandemic, well, we're experiencing it in a heightened sense, in a way that the rest of the country is not experiencing. And folks often say, when the white community has a cold, Black folks got the flu, and I often say in some of these conversations, I say, well, what happens when white folks have a pandemic? What are we dealing with? And what we're dealing with is genocide. And we've always been dealing with genocide, but we're kind of dealing with a heightened stealth form of genocide that where we're separated and we're not able to gather and have the kind of conversations and see what's taking place. We're not able to go into the prisons. We're not even able to send folks in there to see what's going on. And even in the hospital, we're not able to be present with our loved ones to see what's taking place. So in many ways, folks who have traditionally been invisibilized are experiencing kind of invisibility in increased ways. And I recently, this is kind of a tangent, but not exactly, I've been getting calls from folks out of the country. I got a call from some friends in Colombia, from the Palenque, one of the freedom colonies in Colombia, and they were like, so much of our economy was coming from tourism. And now that that's not happening, we don't have money for food. So can you folks put something together so that we could just get a couple of $100s and try to feed folks in the village? Like, we need to do it. It's an imminent emergency. So we're seeing the ways in which kind of capitalism also is causing ripple effects around the globe. And folks are kind of cash strapped to even meet their needs. And we were talking about it like in New York City. It's like, so many folks cannot even leave their homes, or they can't leave their homes for extended period of times. And folks are already living in food deserts, right? So for communities that are already isolated in a variety of ways, we're recognizing that, the issues are being exacerbated. The last thing I will say, and I think it's something we've known before COVID and we always realize, is that whenever we face problems or challenges in our communities, we are the ones that are really going to save ourselves. Like, we will have to come to the need of our brothers and our sisters, and we're also going to have to develop the new systems, methodologies, approaches to really address these challenges. And that's one of the things we're realizing is, like, the issue of policing, we have to really figure out a way to get in front of that. And it's not going to be by working with and having a conversation with the NYPD or other local police departments. They're just not going to help us address this. And unfortunately, many of the elected officials we have can't even get through to the mayor or the police chief. And we said, so we're going to have to figure out a mechanism to protect our community, make folks aware, and have a system where folks can be called in before situations are exacerbated. And we're realizing we're having to do that in so many arenas. We're hoping around the country, a lot of folks are working on like a Mother's Day bailout that'll be happening in a couple of days. So we're also pushing to kind of get folks released from facilities. But unfortunately, I've been saying it to a lot of folks now, and it's something we have to address. Folks are often being released into communities where there's hyper policing. And what I've been saying is, New York City right now, when you look at Black and brown communities, it's just an open air prison. We're kind of in the biggest open air prison in the world, if you look at it. So we have to really begin to think critically about, in a moment of crisis and pandemic, how do we create new systems? How do we recognize the resources that exist within us to address our challenges? I don't want to keep talking because I'll go on all night, but thank you.
No, thank you. That actually, it kind of opened up like my next question to our next panelist, but I do want to address that. From what you were saying, I was taking, in my head, I was just like, laws against our way of living, laws against the way of our living. And that's something that we've experienced as Indigenous people since we got English names. That was like one of the first laws. You couldn't speak your language. You couldn't say your name. It was like, you could, and just yesterday, I mean, I was in tears watching Eleanor Coombs, known as Tootie from Mashpee Wampanoag community. She took her family to go cohogging, and cohogging is really important to us. It's our way, it's our healing, it's our food. The earrings that I have on, the shell that Dr. Fisher has on, the shell that Dan Loudfoot has on. The family went down there to actually go shell fishing because she couldn't feed her family. They're not going to work. So what did she do? She took her family, her grandchildren, her nieces, her nephews, her family, and they went down there to go shell fishing, and almost 10 cop cars showed up. And I mean, it just brought me to tears, because I cannot imagine, even just on Shinnecock, I can't imagine not being able to clam in waters that we've been clamming in before the ships even landed on our shores. And so but there were people fishing beside her, so she wasn't able to even take the clams home. They had no food. So when I keep hearing that laws against our way of living, and that's what it is. And so the next question is actually going to be for Dr. Larry Fisher. You're right there in Massachusetts, where Tisquantum, most of you guys know him as Squanto, but Tisquantum was Patuxet, and he lived in the modern day Plymouth, Massachusetts. And when he was actually captured in the 1500s, along with almost 12 to 15 other ancestors of mine, and Dan and Lance and Larry, that's on the call here. But when he returned, all of his people, of the Patuxent people, were, the village was just bones. It was left bones. There was no mass murdering. There was none of that kind of stuff. It was a plague that had hit. So all of the surrounding tribes believed it to be taboo to actually be upon that land. So the question that I want to have for you, Dr. Fisher, and the work that you're doing, and just share a little bit of that work of Native science. Somehow, right now we talk about smallpox, which is what we are just talking about, measles and all these things, historical plagues. And me and others here being a descendant from the survivors, not the ones that died. So we descend from those that figured something out for us to be able to be here. So in the work that you're doing as a descendant and an ancestor of Tisquantum in Massachusetts with the Matakeesit tribe, and the work you're doing in Native science, what ways are you finding, how are you tapping into that like genetic memory, or in the research that you're doing to find ways to survive this as Indigenous peoples?
Sure, thank you, Shanae, for that opening question. My prayers, first and foremost, are most definitely with my relatives and the Mashpee community. I'm very sorry to hear that that took place yesterday. It's very saddened. It saddens our hearts. Our prayers are for their continued strength with all the injustices in which they face around their self-determination. One of the things that I think that we can learn from our ancestors is that connecting back to our traditional lands and introducing our traditional best practices into the lives of our tribal citizens is where we have to start. This will bring back immediate generational, well, it'll bring back health from our generational disparities, our health disparities from time immemorial, from contact period. You know, I think, you know, what we're facing here, this would help to guide us, you know, bringing us back to the land, reintroducing our culture, our identity. It'll help to guide us back into what we need to do to survive through COVID-19. You know, one of the things I think that we fail to remember is that it was not simply alone the bacteria of the smallpox plague that, you know, that killed us off or made us sick. You know, it really was a separation from our traditional lands, from our identity, our culture, our family, the way that we needed to process having access, you know, to resources, to our natural resources. That's what made us vulnerable around being sick and being more susceptible to the disease, was the fact that we lost our separation to our culture and our land and our identity. You know, and even today, when we don't have that, we often see an uptick, you know, in the comorbidities of Indigenous peoples, of urban Indians. You know, we also see, you know, population density rise, you know, with illness over and over and over. When we have lack of culture, lack of access to our traditional lands, we see mental health rise. You know, we're trying to process a foreign way of understanding medical ideology, you know, and trying to overwrite a gene expression that just doesn't make sense to an Indigenous makeup, to a sequence here, you know, and I think we often forget that. You know, these bacterias and viruses today, what we need to look at is how do we view them from an Indigenous perspective, from Native science? What does Native science look like, right? We may call those Native scientists medicine men today. We may call them, you know, pawas, or, you know, holy men, you know, or holy women. But, you know, the reality is, if we look back into our own Indigenous cultures and our own practices in which we understand, then we'll begin to understand that these viruses are agents of change. You know, today, this virus, this COVID-19 virus, is an agent of change. And it's a part of the evolutionary process, you know, because with viruses comes change. You know, we look at it and we say, yeah, we're infected, our people are sick, and we're not feeling well. That's just one part, you know, but it's a forced mechanism. It's a forced change. And it's not just for our own people. It's for the people who have forgotten somehow of what happened over the last 400 years, or maybe even for the Taino people, the last 528 years. You know, COVID-19 is a manifestation of the forced change that I think we've been needing to see in some sense for the last 400 years, for sure, here in Massachusetts. You know, I don't speak for all nations at all, you know, but I know for certain for the Matakeesit people, definitely, you know, this virus has represented as an agent of change, you know, and I think we need to see that from more of a Native scientific perspective, you know, and remembering, you know, where we come from. What does that mean to us? You know, what does this perspective actually mean? You know, I think that's really what we have there.
Thank you so much, Larry. And I'm proud of you, Larry, of the path that you have done, and especially with this medicine and going to traditional ways and using science in our traditional way. And I want to move this to Sister Romero. My is it Ardelia?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Such an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you. You know, one thing about Indigenous Peoples Movement, as we all was building this coalition, um, when we was pushing for Latino people, we were saying Indigenous. And I'm so happy my brother Immortal Technique, he's a internationally known rap artist and activist. He is the one that taught me and said the so-called Latino people. He said so-called. And so you, sister, you have been getting the so-called Latino people back to the traditional way of being indigenous. As you have been doing so much work of this COVID during the time of COVID, how has COVID been affecting our Spanish speaking or traditional speaking indigenous people from Mexico and where you at in California? But also, have you been noticing that the traditional way of medicine and way of life have been becoming more restored during this time as well? And then you also could just make a brief introduction of who you are.
Hi, my name is Odilia Romero. I am Zapotec from Oaxaca, which was known as Mesoamerica. I came here at the age of 10, only speaking my language. They brought me, I was displaced to the US. Fortunately, director from Cielo, Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo, which is a recently founded nonprofit to serve indigenous people from south of the border in an urban area like Los Angeles, and also the binational coordinator of the Frente Indígena de Organizaciones Binacionales, which is a political organization. And greetings from South LA, where we've been in the last 2 days. It's been very intense with
Sister Romero, your phone is cutting in and out.
Oh no! Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's the reception. So you said you're in South LA.
Yes, I am in South Central LA, where in the last few days it's been very intense for our.
Oh, it's cutting out again. You may have to go in another area.
Let me go see, move and see me.
Okay. And this is the beautiful part about technology, you know.
Let me go closer to the modem then.
Okay. All right.
Is this better now?
Oh, yes.
Yes? Okay, I'm closer to the modem.
Yep.
Okay. So I was saying, greetings from South Central LA. A place where this is the place where a lot of indigenous people from south of the border, we come to live here in South Central LA. And in the last few days, has been quite intense with a lot of policing. They have doubled the police in their neighborhood, which also creates a lot of stress and anxiety in our.
Oh, it keeps cutting out.
I'm cutting out again. Hi.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yeah. Besides the COVID, we have the double policing in South Central currently. And some of the things that, I want to talk about is exactly what you started with, is a lot of people think we're Latinos when they think of.
Keep cutting out.
Actually, can you help me?
It's cutting out again.
Okay.
What she's doing is amazing work, and I know she's still getting. Okay, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm.
Are you there?
Yep. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. What you started with was that when people think of Mexico and Guatemala or any part in Latin America, they automatically assume we are all Latinos and we are all Spanish speaking. In Mexico, there are 68 indigenous nations, over 364 languages. Guatemala has more than 23 languages. So when we come here to the US, there's a lot of discrimination towards us by the other Latinos, the other Mexicans, because one, they fail to know that we speak another language. So that language barrier currently is almost a death sentence for our communities, because currently if anybody goes to the hospital, and as a matter of fact, there's 4 people from a Zapotec community in the hospital without interpreters, without access to their families, and we can't even get there to help them, right? Because of all the restrictions there is. And some of them have passed away because of the language barrier, because they can't go. I mean, Spanish speaking people are having a challenge, but for us, it's a triple challenge, right? You don't speak Spanish, you don't speak English, people don't know your culture. We can't fight, we can't advocate for ourselves, and we can't advocate for them as an organization because of all the restrictions that we're currently living in during the COVID. And this is in LA, and not to mention that we have been displaced through all over the US. The largest percentage of farm workers currently still working, frontline workers, are indigenous people from the state of Oaxaca, from Guerrero, from Chiapas, and no one talks about them, right? When they talk about farm workers, is the Latinx farm workers, but nobody acknowledges that 30 to 40% of the agricultural farm workers in California are indigenous. And also in the case of LA, the largest populations of the workers in the food industry are indigenous Zapotecs, indigenous Mayans. So all these communities now have no jobs. They have no access to healthcare. It's really hard to keep this distance, the social distancing that people talk about, because there's 2 families living in a household, sometimes 3 families, right? So, and they're forced to go out to work because they have to pay rent, because they can't advocate for themselves with the landlords. And we've heard these stories over and over, how the landlords are pushing them to pay the rent and not respecting the moratorium. So but also there's a lot of resistance, right? There's a lot of healing too that's happening. Like people are going to traditional medicine, and we have our medicine man. That's one of the things we tell people. Like when we are displaced, we bring our food, our medicine, our music, everything with us. Just like the other Latinxes, they bring the racism and discrimination and their mariachis. We also bring everything that belongs to us. And we recreate it here in Los Angeles. And right now with the COVID, it's, I always say that what maintains us emotionally stable for us, in the case of the Zapotec My Nation, is our cultural events, right? We could call them cultural. They're a mix of indigenous tradition and Catholicism. And all that has stopped. All our cultural events where you gather and make tamales together, where you eat together, where you make chocolate together, that all has stopped. And I think that somehow it's going to affect us psychologically, emotionally, because that's the only thing we had where we could speak our language, where we could be ourselves, because meanwhile, we're Latinos or Mexicans.
Thank you for sharing that. And a lot of people, and clarifying that, a lot of people do not know that. And I know that a lot of the people that are viewing need to hear and all of that. So thank you so much for that. Moving forward, we're going to come back, and we're going to also, because I think we have enough time for everyone to do some closing remarks. Some closing call to action. Shanae, you think? I think we do, because you had a great question for Riza.
Yeah, that was my next person.
Oh, okay. I'll be quiet, and then we're gonna move it along. We got Dan.
Yeah.
Technique.
Yeah. I was actually
pump up the energy, But you know what though? I gotta say this. this is let's heal each other, even though we're sharing what's happening around the world. But what in our last panel, Natani said he needed to feel and know that he's not in this alone. Yeah. During this social distancing, during this pandemic, I've lost loved ones in the past month. 5 people have died to COVID in the past month for me personally. And I know that people that are viewing this need to know that we are all feeling this, but we are all connecting. We now have a way to be able to reach out and touch each other and say, let's go ahead and let's join in the fight. Let's help one another. I have some extra toilet tissue. Let me send it over to Brazil, or I have some extra hand sanitizer. Let's send it to Australia. You know, this is what this is all about. Okay. Riza.
Yes. Sister, you got a
Yes, I have a question. So for one, I do want you to introduce yourself and your role to our community. But my question for you is, you in the work that you do, you have an immaculate way of really reaching people and waking people up. People that didn't even know anything or wasn't even, I mean, you know how to get on people's radar, our people's radar. But at the same time, you also know how to protect yourself and protect our communities. And in times like this, because I think it was said earlier by Reverend Yearwood on the call earlier, that we have to believe that we're organizing like this and the enemy is doing the same. And so as we're doing this and we're coming up with solutions, I know Dr. Fisher was talking to me about a month ago about the data that's being collected, race data that's being collected, data on health, data on economics and finances and things. And somehow, how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect that data? How do we protect ourselves in organizing? That's my question.
very good question. Very powerful question. And first, let me say peace. Alaikum to everyone. Machiktawe, which means together we as a people move forward. Our brothers here in the Machika tribe, the local area, the Chumash tribe, Miwok Nation, are some of the brothers and sisters that I traveled up to Standing Rock, North Dakota with, along with our sister Queen Najdaha, to stand with our brothers and sisters. There was my first time on the res, on any reservation, and it was powerful. You guys can hear me, right? Because I'm kind of cutting out here. Okay. It was beyond powerful just to stand with our people. They gave me this bracelet here, this one that has the red, the black, the yellow, and I never take it off. I never take it off because it reminds me of our brothers and sisters, our indigenous, who are fighting, and myself having Cherokee and Blackfoot blood coursing through my veins from Greensboro and Mobile, Alabama. My great-grandfather was Cherokee. Great-grandmother was Blackfoot. So we are literally connected. And the things that are affecting us in the Black community here, where I'm from, Compton and LA, are affecting those of us of our Native and Indigenous brothers and sisters too. So we are a family. I'll say this, when it comes to data, information that is coming, the mainstream media is just as confused as everyone else for the majority. And this is me also being a researcher and an activist when it comes to this situation here, when it comes to infectious diseases, vaccines, laws getting passed in this arena, something I've been involved in for years, working directly with Dr. Judy Mikovits, who was the lady who had a gag order for 5 years. The new documentary that just released called Plandemic that YouTube has taken down about 70 times and all over the internet. They do not want her information, what she's saying, to get out. They're like, hell no, do not allow what she's saying to get out, because she's calling out Dr. Fauci, the CDC, HHS, etc., all organizations that have affected and infected indigenous people, Black people, brown people, all of the indigenous Native people of this earth. And so they don't want that to get out. So I've been working with her directly for years, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for years, a number of people in the vaccine movement or the health freedom movement. And one major thing I will say is the independent researchers, the independent journalists, as well as the whistleblowers who work in these organizations are the number one sources of factual, accurate information. When it comes to what the coronavirus is, what is COVID-19, which is separate. Why is this the newest strain of it? How long has it existed? What are the ways to manage it, cure it, etc.? Why are they not telling you about the immune system? Why are they not telling you about different therapies? Why are they telling you to go inside when vitamin D is actually one of the number one things that can help to fight against it? Water and steaming and all these different things. Why are they telling you not to do these things, but they'd rather push vaccines, push the tracking devices under Bill Gates, etc.? Protect yourself by not taking the information from mainstream, number one. Throw that away, which is what we should be doing, period. All right, that's the first thing we should be doing, is not really listening to CNN, CBS, or any of those. But look at those who are independent researchers, those who are directly involved in this, and those who are whistleblowers. Also, if anyone specifically in the area of vaccines has questions about if those vaccines are connected to anything when it comes to autism, autoimmune disorders, etc., there's a book I recommend everyone get called Miller's Review, also known as Miller's 400. It goes over at least 400 studies connecting autism to vaccines, autoimmune disorders to vaccines, etc., etc. So when anyone says there are no studies connecting them, no, there are at minimum 400, if not thousands. You want to also, brothers and sisters, mainstream or westernized medicine. Since our brother was speaking here regarding the native traditional forms of medicine, our brother Dr. Larry Fisher, and I'm very thankful for everyone on here, every single person on here, because we all have different weaponry, whether if it is spiritual, intellectual, whatever it is that we have, we all add to the overall defense of us as a people. But the brother was right on it when it comes to the medicine that we have to use. The number one medicine, of course, will be the earth, Mother Earth. Whether if we say God is Allah, Yah, Jah, the Great Spirit, the Most High. Everything that we have here is what will heal us. The foods, the water, clean water, vegetables, etc. Those are the number one things we have to do. Also, we have to start growing our own food heavily now as well when it comes to protecting and preparing. Another thing is we want to, as another person mentioned, the physical preparation has to be enhanced now more than ever, meaning we have to exercise far more. We have to train in some form of martial arts, boxing, etc. Sisters and brothers, our sister who is currently on, who's currently fighting now, and I know she had to jump off, but she's there now, where she said they were tearing down the barricades. It's primarily women there, and they have the 6 tiny houses, and they don't really have any protection. That's happening all across the country when it comes to women. The men are not present as we should be. Some areas, there are just not enough of us, but then the areas where we are present, we're not present. Okay, we're not mentally present, we're not spiritually present. And yes, we've been broken down to a degree, but in other areas, we're just not putting forth that effort that we should be putting forth. And I'll say, so in that aspect, we have to become far more security minded, far more now. Minister Farrakhan teaches us that, of course, every nation cannot be a nation without security. We must have security in every single way. So when it comes to the information, again, as I said before, independent journalists, independent researchers, and whistleblowers primarily are the ones who have the accurate, up-to-date data and information. And I can include in the chat, I'll just go over a number of names, doctors, whistleblowers. I'll put those in the chat so everyone can have those for research purposes. And also taking everything that deals with immune boosting. Because just on a note, when it comes to the COVID-19, it's not that virus alone, really, that's doing virtually anything. It is the pre-existing medical conditions that all of us, as either Indigenous, Native, Black, Brown people, experience due to the food or so-called food in our inner city neighborhoods due to the drugs and alcohol, due to the poor air, water, etc., that has broken down our body's DNA over decades and centuries to where now once this virus, this new one was released, it pretty much aggravates and agitates our overall pre-existing medical condition. So it's very wicked how they set it up, but the way to get out of it are to take lots of different immune boosters. Okay, lots of different basic immune boosters that help, especially citrus fruits, water, etc. So, I can go on a lot when it comes to this area, but protecting ourselves has to be done in every single way, shape, and form as of right now. And let us not ever think that because we are in the year 2020, that the enemy who collects all the data, that collects everything dealing with this Zoom call, everything dealing with YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, your text messages, your phone calls, your emails, please do not think that they will not do something diabolical just because we're in 2020, just because we can get a burger with, people and we can hang out. There is a very wicked enemy that still does not care about anyone, including poor white people. Just make it very clear, so let's just not be foolish. Let's be very warrior minded. It's time for the warrior spirit to take over of Crazy Horse, of Red Cloud, of Sitting Bull, of Geronimo and all the others and all of our brothers and sisters. So let us go into that spirit and let's truly stand up for our people.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, because it's important that we are literally in these times, like you said, so we have to awaken those spirits and our genetic memory, although, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I can't.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
My best friend's on here. I can't say so many things. And people like, that's not, but at the same time, there is, frequencies within our bodies, and so when we do gather, it's been said a lot, certain things about our genetic memory begins to remember things, and so the first place to destroy us is to remove what we remember spiritually. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that. So Dan, now that the ladies have spoken, I want to say thank you so much for reminding us of these traditions, and we do practice them. Can you share with us, first of all, who are you, and then share with us, what you've been doing during this quarantine to gather our people and to heal our people.
Before you say that, Dan, you have been uplifting my spirit. I've been watching this social distance powwow. Yeah. I've been renewed and everything. So I just got to give you, your flowers now.
You guys hear me? Am I right? Volume?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been so much said here, and it's hard to kind of follow up with anything. But what Casey, say it again. Casey, say your name. Keith. What he started off with was so much and so fast. And what he's saying, yes, we have to do everything fast, but I think it's all important for us to slow down too, because we don't need to rush through things and rush through life, especially at this time. This is a good time for us to slow down, to spend time with our family, to listen. And, Creator did this to slow us all down, and this is why we're having this time. Look at all of us on this call. When would have this ever happened in our previous to this? So look at what we're doing now, and it's just a crazy time to experience conversations like this, but I'm thankful for it because technology allows us to do this. And, I'll start off by the whole, even just God, like the way we refer to God. And, I refer to God as creator, but in traditional languages for me is Namanatum, Katapatash, Namanatum, thank you, creator. And I think one of the things we all have to get back to is how do we say creator or God in our traditional language? Because a lot of it is God isn't hearing us. And whether that's the language of the land you're on, whether that's your language traditionally, get back to how do we say thank you to God, because God needs to hear us, with these prayers. And, as Indigenous people, everything we do is connected to creator, whether you admit it or not. So for me, I'm one of the co-founders of Social Distance Powwow, but I also I own Wampumware, which is a jewelry company, and I also own Pequot Properties, which is a real estate company. So I'm trying to buy our indigenous lands back one house at a time. That's my saying for that. So with all this, yeah, I lose my train of thought a lot, pardon me, but because there's so much going on in my brain with everything that was said here. But anyway, we are all connected to creator. And what we have to do is listen to what creator is telling us. And whether we react or act to those things, is what we have to do. And for me, I was depressed when this virus hit. I tried to ignore it. I come from a place where my wife, she's from the Crow tribe. She's also Blackfoot. They're here in Montana. So my wife's in public health, and so this virus really hit home for me because she's in this field, and I see her stressing out about this, and I see myself stressing out about this, and all my fellow artists and other vendors, native vendors that have been affected by this. Everyone's stressed out, was stressed out. So I wanted to. There wasn't a platform that existed for Indigenous people. And like Lance, who's an elder. I don't know if he's an elder yet, but I'll call him. He's an elder to me. So all right. So one thing Lance was talking about was media. Media. Our voices are often silenced and marginalized. So we need more of our own media platforms, and we need more of our own spaces to get our voices heard. So, for the first time and that I can remember, is this platform, Social Distance Powwow, has kind of taken off because it's one of the first times where our voices have been heard. And there's a platform where all of us are welcome. It's a platform where all of us can dance, share this medicine. It's a platform for people to share their art, and these things didn't exist before this time. So for me, this virus, yes, it's been a blessing because it slowed me down. It's slowed us all down, and it's giving us a time to think and giving us a time to reconnect again with family and, get close. For me, it's been a good time to get closer to my kids, because being an artist, a vendor, I travel around to powwows and conferences. I'm usually gone most of the time. So this has actually been a good time for me to be closer to my family, And was there more questions you guys have for me while I'm here? Or?
No, I just wanted to, just for you to just share your story. And I think you hit it right on the nose about, we have to actually, slow down and listen. And
I'll give one more quick story. This is a fast one. So I live in a white town of Bozeman, Montana, because my wife, she's a professor here at Montana State University here in Montana. And the nearest reservation is her reservation, the Crow Reservation, which is about 2 hours east, going towards Billings, past that. So I live in a town that's majority white people. My neighbors are white, and they're rebuilding our fence that they initially built. And the fences around here, they build with TV poles, lodgepole pine. So what's interesting with this whole concept of the world we're in, we have white people that build fences out of my wife's traditional teepee poles, lodgepole pine. And while her family still today, if you've ever been to Crow Fair or ever seen, they still build houses. So this is a concept we have to understand. Why are we building fences still? Why aren't we building more houses? Why aren't we building more spaces like this where we come together more? We need to come together, and this is so much, this society has constantly broke us all down and to separate us, get in our own boxes. And we all need more of this, which is to come together, because this is what will rebuild the earth. And, it needs to happen. And it's slowly happening, I think.
Thank you so much, Dan. What you're doing with social distancing powwow, and I'm so
social
happy.
Distance, by the way, social distance powwow. So that name, I've reclaimed social distancing that you constantly hear in the media. And a lot of it is no one can say it right because we're so brainwashed by the media. But back east, as you know, we have socials at a distance and we have powwows. This is powwows at a distance. So it's both of those things I've reclaimed back to this,
Social distance powwow.
Yeah.
So to be able to get back to our to connecting everyone, all
Right.
the tribal nations and everyone all across this nation. So thank you so much for being on this, and let's heal each other is underline of smallpox, from smallpox to COVID-19. Let's heal each other. So social distance powwow has been healing a lot of us. And one of our sisters just texted us right now and said, please tell them that I've been watching it every time right before she has class. And so using entertainment, using culture is so important. And I'm so happy that my long brother, Immortal Technique, international hip hop artist, Peruvian American, revolutionary freedom fighter. You have been, where'd the video go? Where'd he go? Okay.
Man,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
You've been on the front line on so many fights, from Palestine to all over. And it was really important that we have you on here because of the international connecting. You use entertainment, you use music, you use hip hop to be able to connect everyone. During this time of COVID, how are you able to still connect everyone? And moving forward, there's a lot of artists, a lot of creatives that are watching this, that are trying to figure out what can they do in regards to keep, especially those that have to be amongst people to perform and everything. So what does it look like post COVID, and then what are you doing now in this pandemic?
Just wanted to say, first and foremost, it's a great honor to be here with all the people that have dedicated their lives to try and helping Indigenous people, and also for fostering new relationships, new alliances, or as I should historically point out is the correct way to say it, old alliances renewed. What I think is a powerful message for people to understand is that a lot of us have experienced corona, the original version of the virus, which was the common cold. 1 out of 3 common colds was a coronavirus. And now we're dealing with a mutated version of what that is. And I think the artistic community is obviously slightly confused about how to react. For example, all the money train has stopped. No one can do live shows. And I think for me, my experience is different with being quarantined or being out, because I basically leave the house whenever I want to. And it's not to tout or stick my nose up at the social distancing rules. No, it's because as an artist, we strive to break the fourth wall, which is to talk directly to the audience. But then there's the fifth and the sixth wall, because we live in a 3-dimensional world. We want to include the audience in what we do, and we also want to influence people to make change on their own. So I started doing deliveries and just supply drops for people in the neighborhood in Harlem. And these are mostly elderly people. And what I realized is a lot of elders are very afraid. They don't know what to believe. For example, the brother, a couple before me, Riza Islam, pointed out that there's a lot of disinformation being pushed by the mainstream media. And the problem is that for a lot of people, they find disinformation anywhere. A lot of times you find people that are online and they're not mainstream media. There's some of the independent researchers that the brother pointed out, but even their stuff doesn't hold up to scrutiny. We have to scrutinize everything, not just one thing, but a lot of things, everything. And I think the most important thing that we have to realize is how we actually got here, right? We were colonized by various different aspects and understandings, right? And one of these things is a belief. And one thing we have to understand is that all the Indigenous people around the world that are watching this broadcast right now, we're still here, and you can still hear me, and we're still alive for 2 reasons. I'm going to show them to you now. We're alive for this reason, but we're also alive for this reason, okay? We're alive because we strove and we fought back, because the idea that Black people and Indigenous people submitted to slavery so meekly is one of the great fallacies that I've always misunderstood, but understood in the sense of what a powerful propaganda tool it was. I'm a South American person, an Indigenous person from South America, from Peru. So when I was young,
My whole life, we grew up thinking that 150 Spaniards in armor destroyed an empire of 1.8 million people. And fundamentally, we found out later that that's false, that they used divisions within indigenous people to set one tribe against another, very similarly to the way they did here. And one thing that we have to acknowledge is that one of the big things that we haven't been able to confront as a community is the longest standing form of colonization, and that's our belief. And how do we overcome that belief, right? And we have to first understand what we've been dealing with. What we've been dealing with is a European interpretation of Christianity, right? Now, I don't have all the understandings, and I can't, listen, it's very hard to pluck a Bible away from a quote unquote Latino person or an indigenous person. They might punch you in the face before they do that. So I'm not sitting here professing to say that we have an immediate separation, because I don't know if that's even plausible or possible with a quote unquote church, but I'm going to tell you how these people do, okay, from a historical perspective. Half the Crusades, right? Excuse me. Sorry, someone was calling me. Half the Crusades weren't even against other Christians, right? They were to consolidate Christianity into one form. After Europeans came here to this continent, they melted themselves down after a couple of 100 years until they became this anomaly called white people. And eventually they'll have to melt down the new forms of Christianity that they've developed now. Remember, the Crusades were about destroying the hundreds of sects of religiousness. So the question doesn't just become, you know, what are we fighting for? I'm out there every day doing different things. The question becomes, what mentality will we adopt because of this, right? Now we see as indigenous people that the tables are very clear. The tables have been turned, and it's very clear for us to make sense of what actually happened to our people. No more can they use the excuse of, oh, this was a bunch of Indian people that got sick. No. This was a planned genocide. Europeans had experience with it since the Crusade. The idea that you could launch dead bodies into a town and spread disease and plague. And what they essentially did when they came here was the same thing. Now, we all understand that. But for years in the mainstream media and in all these other platforms, we've been fed this idea, no, this was an accident. This didn't happen on purpose. And recently I saw a basketball player, right, who was admonished globally for touching a microphone, right? For not even knowing if he had the disease or not, for doing that, for putting his hands on something. So I think this makes it incredibly clear to our people that, echoing what the sister said before, we've been living in almost a constant tumultuous situation. And this just interrupted that, right? This interrupted the slow genocide and pushed a fast forward version of it. Right? In the same way, like a person who has to understand as an elder who's out there, because I learned this very young going to the powwows. Not everybody who's old is an elder. Elders are people who kick knowledge. Elders are people who sacrifice, who teach people by the failures that they've had in life. And one thing that I will say that I've experienced around indigenous people is that some of the elders have to understand that we're in crisis mode. And in no way, shape, or form am I trying to lecture them, but you have to understand that I was one of those kids at the Shinnecock Reservation powwow with all the homies that stole a bunch of motorcycles and was wilding out and doing reckless stuff at my age, robbing people. So when you're trying to reach the kids, you're trying to reach a kid that was like me, okay? And you elders, I love y'all, but recognize something. We have to stop worrying so much if the kids are smoking weed and worry if they're smoking meth or smoking crack. We have to stop worrying if kids are cussing or if they're being taken away and stolen from us or and put in a cage or being trafficked, right? The things that are ultimately important for a lot of people have been the exercise of our culture, our spiritualism. But what we haven't acknowledged is in the echoes of everything that the United States has done outside of this country. Right. And I learned this from the great Russell Means, the father of my brother Natani, who was on. And he educated me to this. Everything the United States has done outside of this country was tested on indigenous people first. Before these people used the gas that they used in World War I, it was tested on indigenous people before they had biological weapons. So what are they testing on us now? this is a lot. This is a human trial. This is a human trial. And let's never forget the people who we dealt with who built this quote unquote country. You know, I've gotten a lot of trouble for saying this over the week, but this country was founded by a man called Thomas Jefferson, who was the Jeffrey Epstein of his era, who had sex with his own daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who was sitting here preaching and propagating freedom, while at the same time writing that indigenous people were soulless savages in the Bill of Rights. So what I'm saying to people is that, yes, we can have an understanding, a unification, and we can reach across the board to people who have been old allies. You know, me and Brother Rizza Islam have spoken about this plenty of times, about the necessity for indigenous and Black people to come together, because
That's right.
the Europeans got African people to become buffalo soldiers, and they didn't get nothing out of it. And at the same time, I had this conversation with him directly because I learned it from the Seminole people, and I said I can understand why Black people would be nervous to have a peace treaty with Latins. You can't have a peace treaty with Latins. Latins are the people who stole you. Latins are the people who destroyed us. Now, a treaty with indigenous people, that's different. But how to separate one from the Latin identity, that's a different story. That's a process. That's a decolonization understanding that comes little by little through learning, through manifestation, through prayer, through meditation. But remember, and I want to take my hat off to all the organizers out there. And one thing I just want to say really quickly before I get out of here is I learned this just in the Bronx. Look, love doesn't trump hate. Organizing trumps it all. Okay. So I want to tell the people we have a place that we've been working with that supplies like restaurants and stuff like that. And one of our homies got the pass to it. So every once a week we can make a drop and pick up like maybe like supplies that would normally cost about $1,500 to like maybe a few $100s. We found a way to G the system, and we're gonna do it again. And you know, that's about all I can say. But please, for the people that are out there that needed supplies and stuff like that, you can hit me on a DM. The people who was in the chat talking about how they sending stuff. We're just trying to network. We're trying to get whatever we can to however many people we can. I've done this in Haiti. We did this in Afghanistan. We went to Houston after the flood. I've been in Standing Rock, all those places. And the thing that I see in common is that the spirit of the people is still strong, that they haven't given up. And that the greatest lie ever told about any of our people is that we came quietly, okay? Those arrows never started firing as long as they had wagons. And these people have been encroaching again and again and again. And in my belief, it's not due to any fundamental evil. It's due to a system that they set up to rule themselves, in which one was built on top of the other, right? All European nations built on top of another. It's much smaller than you think it is. I've toured all over it. It could fit into a third of the United States. But what do we have here? Right now, we have people built on top of one another. You take the richest, most affluent people in the world and you put them in the projects where they have to live on top of one another, you're going to get proximity crime. You get situations like this going on, you get even more of that. That's what we're dealing with here in New York. We're dealing with people that are afraid to stop at a red light because people are getting robbed at red lights. You got people out in the street who they are talking to themselves and walking around crazy. Why? Because administrative adjournment, which means you just got thrown in the street, left all the people who had mental health issues without meds, without diagnosis, without doctors, without outpatient care. Because as anybody who's done any activism work within the justice system knows, there's more mental health work going on in the prison than there is out here in the free world. So
correct.
That's kind of what we're dealing with in terms of the lunacy of it, that we just want to set examples as an artist. Listen, I'm not mad that people are protesting the government. Someone asked me how I felt about the people with the guns protesting there. And I said, listen, I don't want the cops to shoot those people. They have a right to say whatever they want. What I would like is for the police, and I would like people to acknowledge this. The police are not doing their job, and they are serving no justice until they find the same patience, temerity, and understanding to speak to an indigenous woman or a Black unarmed child as a white man with a gun that's screaming in their fucking face. And until we have that, we have no justice with them. And we are absolutely rescinded to obey any colonial laws that they set up, because they have not delivered on any of their promises. The working class white people of this country are going to learn very soon that the very, very small amount of modicums of freedoms that they've been given in terms of what they have, in terms of what they've given up, has not added up. And it's going to continue to embroil. And let me just remind you something else, another gem that me and Rizza talked about. The last time Black and brown people got really mad at each other, we destroyed a high school in Los Angeles. The last time white people got really mad at each other and had a problem, they ripped the country in half. So we see what direction is going in. And we've survived this many times. We've survived all kinds of diseases. But the one disease that we can't ever survive is losing hope, losing the idea that there is a way for us to get through this. Because every time I was reminded by my mother about the indigenous and African ancestry, she said, don't ever be taught to be ashamed of that. Those people went through something you couldn't possibly imagine, things that people weren't built to go through these days. And we're still here. You know, like my Palestinian brothers and sisters say, existence is resistance. And that's what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen. That's the bottom line. We got to keep existing. However we can do it, we got to keep existing. If that means sharing resources, that's what I'm here to do. Hit me up on my IG in a private message and just tell me who you are, and Yanaja will connect me and we'll try to get some supplies out to you. That's just what I'm doing out here, just trying to make moves. And, you know, in terms of an artist, sure, I think anybody can say and make words sound great, and that's wonderful. But we don't just need artists, we need leaders. And a leader doesn't just order people. A leader leads by example. Like when I went to Standing Rock, I didn't tell people this is what you're going to do. No, I showed up and said, what do you need? You need me to be a cab and drive activists here and there. You know, we need more of that. So I guess that's how I'm going to end it, by saying, hey, what do you need? Holla at me. I'm here, your brother from Harlem, Immortal Technique, the pyramid builder from South America.
Thank you so much.
That's right, brother. That's right.
Thank you. And you know what? The thing is that that's exactly what this is about, is that all of the resources, everyone from the last panel to this panel, you know, all of you all shared exactly what's happening in the community and the needs. So all of the people that are tuning in, make sure you hit us up, and any one of the panelists that said that we need supplies, let us know and we'll connect you if you don't already have their direct connect. And that's what we are, Indigenous Peoples Movement. We're a hub and an outreach to be able to help our people all over the world. We are a global resource, a global connector, a global bridge. And so we want to just thank all of you all. And Neil, Yorta, you've been up for a day. So thank you for being a part of both of these panels. He's all the way in Australia, so he's been up for an entire day. And I wanted to know, before we close out, any of our international people, Yorta, or Dara, if you know you're a traditional Indigenous song or prayer that you could close us out in. So if any of you are, you do, Dara? Okay. If you could close us out all the way from the Amazon, and in a traditional song or prayer to close us out. And for everyone, before we close out, everyone tuning in, Danae, we want to thank all of you all and us, the moderators, myself, Yanaja Lone Wolf.
And myself, Sakampanayu Mashuna Tuiuskwa, Shanae Bullock, thank you so much. This is just definitely liberating, and that's what we need. And thank you for bearing with me through this. And I hope that, you know, we can stay connected. The globe has been watching, and we've got a lot of work to do. So thank each and every one of you. And my prayers are with each and every one of you.
And we got to do a part 2. Not enough. We have to do a part 2 because I really, you know, we all wanted to hear more. And we are going to do a part 2. We have so much information, so much things globally, and information that we need to teach. So everyone that was tuning in, I hope you was writing down notes, because there was a lot of things that you could go and research as we had these. You had notes. So, okay, everyone, please do not log off. Let's welcome our sister from the Amazon. And can you please pronounce your name so we know how to say your name?
Of course. My name is Dayara. Dayara. And I'd like to thank you so much. I have learned a lot with you, and I really honor your fight. We are all in the same resistance. And it was like a big lesson. Here in my radio, we say that we are the seeds of the dreams of our grandfathers, and we need to grow up. It's up to our generation to continue facing all this history. And I thank so much for your spirituality, for the wisdom of your nations, the wisdom of your grandfathers and grandmothers. And in these days where people are talking about the end of the world, our nations know that the world has ended many times, and it's still ending. The real issue is what world we want to see it together. What is the culture of life? Instead of the necropolitics or the necroculture, see it a culture of life, a culture of politics. And so I'd like to share a song that is from my father, for my grandfather. In my nation, is not actually, is kind of a taboo, a woman singing that kind of songs. But happily, my family has decided to open a space to the younger women. And that is the kind of revolution that we need to consider in humanity. How to build self-respect, freedom is what we are trying to sustain all these centuries as indigenous. Just keep the memory alive. And so this is a song of the waters. And I'd like to share a little story, because in the Tucano Nation, we say that we came like sailing on a big canoe that is the serpent, that is the anaconda. And this canoe came from the spiritual world and traveled all over the waters. And so each time the canoe stopped, a new nation was on the land. So for me, we are all relative. We are all in the same canoe. This ship is our Mother Earth. This ship is our Mother Water. And so this song is for cleansing the waters. And I have my rad. I don't know how to say it in English. Okay. I'd like to thank all the medicines, the sacred medicines of every nation. I'd like to thank all the sacred waters, the forests, the mountains, the deserts, Mother Earth, Mother Water, Father Sky, Grandfather Fire. I'd like to thank all the nations and all the grandfathers, wishing good health and freedom to the grandchildren of this land, as we are here now, the best ancestors we can be. Thank you so much. Año.
Thank you, everyone. Blessings. Matakiasi. We're all related. Peace.
All righty. Peace, Kananamu.
Peace, family.
Bye.